Willow smiled slightly. "If it works on hands, why not on other things? Is that it?" "Exactly," Jessica said. "Here, let me help you out of your clothes." I can manage better." Jessica smiled at Willow and began unfastening her skirt. "There's no room for modesty at a birthing. What will happen does, willy-nilly, without so much as a by your leave, and by the time it does happen, neither one of us will have a thought in our minds but getting the job done." Willow let out a long breath. "You're always surprising me." "You mean I'm slightly less useless than Wolfe would have you believe?" "What nonsense! I could have shaken Wolfe by his ears for his bad temper. You can no more help the circumstances of your birth than he can." Jessica smiled rather grimly and said nothing. "What surprised me," Willow said, "was that you knew nothing about the physical side of marriage, so I assumed you were reticent about physical things and probably horribly embarrassed by them as well. But you're quite practical about births, aren't you?" "I spent my first 9 years on a country estate. Dogs, sheep, cats, horses, pigs, cows, rabbits, the whole lot. They all conceived and gave birth with the regularity of the sun rising." "Particularly the rabbits?" Willow suggested with a slight smile. Jessica laughed. "Those blessed bunnies were the only crop that never failed, rain or shine." "I'm glad you're not a city aristocrat," Willow admitted. "I've never attended a birth, but I believe I'll need you, if only to be reassured that someone is here to care for the baby if I'm too tired at first." Jessica's determined smile almost slipped. She had never had the luck to deal with a live birth, but that wasn't something Jessica was going to mention. At the moment, keeping Willow's spirits up was all that mattered. Talking of difficult births and dead babies was the last thing she needed. "Now, lean on me while you step out of your skirt and petticoat," Jessica said. Working quickly but without the appearance of haste, Jessica got Willow washed and dressed in a clean gown. The bed was prepared by stripping off the old linens, putting a tarpaulin over the mattress, and then putting on clean linens. By the time Willow crawled awkwardly into bed, another contraction had come. It, too, wrapped fully around her body. There was no doubt that the labor was real. "I'll be right back," Jessica said as she tucked the covers beneath Willow's chin. "If you hear the rifle, don't worry. I'm calling in the men." "No, I'm fine. I don't need them." "Willow, what do you think Caleb would do to the person who kept him from you when you were in need?" Tears brightened Willow's eyes. "But the mares need him more than I do." "Wolfe will help the mares. He loves horses as he loves nothing else on earth." "Except you." Jessica smiled sadly. "Tree that stands alone doesn't love me. He cares for me, that's all, and it's more than I deserve." "Nonsense," Willow said. "No, simple truth. Everything Wolfe said about me last night was true. I forced this marriage against Wolfe's wishes. He wanted a Western wife like you. He got an aristocrat who didn't even know how to comb her own hair." Jessica smiled at the look of shock on Willow's face. "'Tis true, I'm afraid," Jessica said. "The hairbrush was as foreign in my hand as a gold coin in a beggar's grasp." "Dear Lord," Willow whispered. "But I'm learning, thanks in large part to you." Jessica smoothed her hand over Willow's hair. "Rest. You'll need your strength to bring Caleb's baby into the world." Willow turned and looked out the window. Nothing showed but trees bent and writhing in the wind. "They won't be able to hear the rifle," she said calmly. "They're upwind of us." Silently, Jessica agreed, but went to the porch anyway. The wind sucked the door handle from her grasp and sent the door slamming back upon the wall. The air was icy. Shivering, she raised the carbine that had been a present for a wedding that should never have taken place. The gold and silver inlay smoldered in the subdued light of the storm. She fired 3 spaced shots, waited, then fired 3 more spaced shots. Shivering violently, she lowered the carbine and retreated to the house's shelter. After a brief struggle, she managed to shut the door once again, closing out the icy wind. For a long moment, Jessica stood alone in the living room, gathering herself for what was to come. Then she went to work. Ignoring her trembling hands, she scrubbed her sharp darning scissors, wrapped them in a clean towel, and set them on top of the pristine receiving blankets Willow had prepared with such love. The thought of wrapping up one more tiny corpse sent a wave of sick despair through Jessica. She had seen the baby clothes and carefully made cradle. She had seen Caleb's love and Willow's pleasure when he held his hand on her womb and felt their baby move. Please, God, let this baby be born alive. The wind battered the house, sending a chill through Jessica. Quickly, she gathered a book and a chair and went back to Willow. It seemed to help Mother if I read to her, Jessica said with a calm that was wholly false. If that doesn't appeal, I'll just sit quietly until you need me. Please, Willow said quickly, her voice strained. Read. Try not to hold your breath when the pain comes, Jessica said gently. It only makes it worse. Jessica began reading A Midsummer Night's Dream. Time went quickly, marked off by contractions that became closer together and harder until only a handful of minutes came between. The demands of birth took Willow's body, made it rigid, and dragged low sounds from her. Try not to fight it, Jessica said quietly. Birth is stronger than any of us. We can't conquer it. We can only share it with the babe. Very slowly, Willow relaxed despite the continued grip of pain. Here, Jessica said, taking a piece of leather strap from her pocket. Put this between your teeth. Neither woman heard the front door open, nor did they hear Caleb's voice calling for Willow. Jessica's first realization of Caleb's presence came when a pair of riding gloves hit the floor at her feet and a large masculine hand reached past her to Willow. No, Jessica said fiercely, blocking the hand with her body. Wash yourself first. Nothing dirty must touch her or the child, or you'll risk fever. Caleb grabbed the fallen gloves and left the room in a rush. When he reappeared, he was dripping water, smelling of soap, and wearing nothing but a pair of clean breeches. He dressed quickly. Willow let out a low sound as the contraction peaked. When her eyes opened, she saw Caleb fastening his pants. Almost guiltily, she let go of Jessica's hand, spat out the strip of leather, and concealed it beneath the covers. She wasn't quick enough. Few people were when it came to hiding things from Caleb's golden eyes. I told Jessie not to fire the rifle, Willow said. The mares... Wolfe found them, Caleb interrupted as he reached for a shirt. What's this about a rifle? I tried to call you in when Willow began labor, Jessica said as she wrung out a cloth to cool Willow's face. I didn't hear any shots. Jessica glanced at the window. It was still light outside. The wind still howled. None of the other men had returned. Then how did you know to come? She asked. I heard Willow calling my name. Jessica stared at Caleb, but he had eyes only for his wife. He was kneeling next to the bed in a carelessly buttoned shirt. No one but Jessica noticed the half-unfastened clothing as Caleb bent down to Willow, talking softly, stroking her hair, and smiling at her with such tenderness that Jessica felt tears catch in her throat. When the next contraction came, it was Caleb's hands that Willow gripped. She struggled not to cry out, but couldn't stifle a rough sound. Go ahead, Caleb said. Scream or curse or cry. Whatever helps. Willow shook her head. When the contraction passed, Jessica fished out the piece of rain Willow had hidden beneath the covers. She put the leather strip on the blanket next to Willow. "I prepared this and kept it near because I knew you would need it," Jessica said. "If you won't cry out or use the leather, I'll tell Caleb to leave. The last thing you should be worried about is fighting yourself so as not to upset your husband. He put the babe in your body. He can share in the pain as well as the pleasure of its birth." Willow's mouth set in a mutinous line. Caleb kissed his wife and said something too soft for Jessica to hear. "I didn't want to worry you," Willow said. "Love, you get upset if I burn myself cooking." He lifted her hands and kissed them very gently. Then he picked up the leather strap. The marks of her teeth showed clearly. His fingers tightened on the dark leather. "If I could bear it for you, I would," he said roughly. "I know. Just having you here helps me." It was true. Despite the force of the contractions, Jessica saw that the lines of tension in Willow's face had eased. When Caleb bent his head and whispered to his wife, the smile she gave him was as full of love as her eyes. Then Willow's body was claimed once more by the demands of birth. Caleb felt the tension of her muscles. Without a word, he held out the strap. She took it between her teeth just as a powerful contraction arched her whole body. After that, there was little time for anything but easing Willow in small ways while she performed the hard work of bringing another life into the world. As the rhythmic fury of birth progressed, Jessica prayed silently, fiercely, that it wouldn't all be in vain, all the wrenching pain and the blood, the set agony of Caleb's face speaking eloquently of his fear and love for the woman who was giving birth to his child. Finally, the contractions came so quickly that there was no time between for Willow to recover. Panting, sweating, dazed, she tried to smile at Caleb, only to be swept up once again. "How much longer?" Caleb asked tightly of Jessica. "As long as the babe requires. She can't take much more of this. You would be surprised at what a woman can endure." And Caleb was. In the final throes of birth, Willow's hands gripped with a power that amazed Caleb, leaving bruises on his work-hardened hands, bruises that he didn't even notice until later. He had care only for Willow, for giving her what ease he could. The sound of a baby's cries came as a shock. "You have a son," Jessica said, laughing and crying at the same time. "A beautiful, red-faced, crying, living son." Willow smiled and closed her eyes, letting everything slide away but the knowledge of her son and her husband's kiss burning in the center of her hand. Jessica managed to cut and tie the cord despite the happy tears running down her face. She washed the baby in warm water, wrapped him in receiving blankets, and handed him to Caleb. She was stunned to see tears in Caleb's eyes as he looked at his child. "Show Willow your son," Jessica said huskily. "Then put him to her breast. He needs to feel her heartbeat again. She needs to feel his." Reverently, Caleb took their son to Willow. When Jessica looked up again, Willow was lying in her husband's arms, and the baby was sucking eagerly, his tiny head cradled by Caleb's big hand. "Are you all right?" Wolfe asked urgently, pulling Jessica into his arms before she could answer. "Willow did the work, not I." Wolfe didn't seem to hear. He held Jessica hard against him. "When Reno told me, I kept thinking of your mother, of the horror you have of birth. I was afraid being near another childbed would terrify you." "I was afraid, too," Jessica admitted, wrapping her arms around Wolfe's lean waist. "I was afraid it would be born dead like all the others." Wolfe made a hoarse sound, but the hand that stroked Jessica's disheveled hair was very gentle. "But this baby was alive," she continued, excitement vibrating in every word. "Red-faced and crying, waving tiny fists with black hair and long limbs. It was perfect, and it was alive." Smiling, Wolfe bent and kissed her. When she returned the kiss rather than retreating, heat ran like leashed lightning through him. Memories of last night had come to him throughout the day, shaking him. He hungered for Jessica in ways he hadn't believed possible. Unable to stop himself, Wolfe urged Jessica's lips apart. Despite the elemental need hardening his body, he tasted her with great gentleness, absorbing her warmth and the soft breaking of her breath when his tongue first touched hers. It was a long time before he lifted his head. Reno said both Willow and the boy are doing well, Wolfe said finally, looking toward the closed bedroom door. Yes, Jessica smiled and kissed the corner of Wolfe's mouth. Very, very well. Oh, Wolfe, it was extraordinary. To hold a new life where none was before made me feel as though I had touched God's smile. The look on Caleb's face when he held his son told me he felt the same way. When will I be allowed to see this little red-faced miracle? Willow can't wait to share him. As soon as you wash, you can go in. I'm clean as sunlight, Wolfe said wryly. Reno ran me through the washhouse personally and thoroughly, told me he wasn't risking his one and only nephew on some dirty half-breed. What? Jessica's head snapped up. Is he still alive? Haven't you heard? He's pure greased lightning with that 6-gun. I was as meek as a lamb, even washed behind my ears twice. I'll box his ears, she muttered, calling you names. He ought to be ashamed. Wolfe made a smothered sound and broke into laughter as he lifted Jessica off her feet in a big hug. Such a fierce little elf, he said against her lips. I was only teasing. Reno has called me some names from time to time, but none of them had anything to do with my Cheyenne mother. The laughter in Wolfe's eyes made them a beautiful midnight blue. The strong slant of his cheekbones and his starkly defined mouth were heightened rather than blurred by his smile. Jessica realized anew how compelling Wolfe's features were to her. Suddenly she wondered what it would be like to look down into the face of a sleeping baby and see hints of Wolfe's beloved face. What an odd sound. Are you all right, Jessica? Yes. No, that is... Jessica's aquamarine eyes searched Wolfe's face. She slid her fingers into his black hair and found that it was still damp. The cool, sleek texture made her shiver with pleasure and say his name as she watched him with wide, wondering eyes. Jessie, are you all right? You're looking at me as though you've never seen me before. I haven't. Before he could say anything, she lifted her mouth to his. Kiss me, Wolfe. Kiss me hard. The kiss Wolfe gave Jessica was deep, hot, frankly hungry. When it ended, both of them were breathing too rapidly. Just as he bent to take her mouth again, the front door closed hard. You keep that up, and there'll be one more small screamer come winter, Rafe said, trying and failing to swallow his smile. Wolfe tucked Jessica's fiery face against his chest. We were just getting ready to admire your nephew. Uh-huh. What's this I hear about a complete bath before I get to see the little mite? Ask Reno. I did. He has a scrub brush the size of a wagon seat and pure deviltry in his eyes. Jessica laughed into Wolfe's shirt. Are you strangling her? Rafe asked politely. Wolfe's hand slid beneath Jessica's chin. He tilted her face up and brushed a kiss over her lips. Are you strangling? Wolfe asked softly. She blushed and said something Rafe couldn't hear. What was that? Rafe asked. She said to enjoy your bath. Damn. I was afraid of that. Don't wear out the little morsel before I get back. Which morsel? Wolfe asked. Wolfe, Jessica said, hitting his chest with her hand. Rafe was laughing as he shut the front door behind him. "Come on, morsel," Wolfe said, putting Jessica's feet back on the floor. "Show me the little miracle." Willow's radiant smile belied the paleness of her skin as she welcomed Wolfe. Caleb was sitting next to the bed, holding the sleeping baby in the crook of his arm. When Wolfe walked close, Caleb gently shifted the small burden. "Put one hand under his head and the other under his bottom," Jessica said to Wolfe. "Jesus," Wolfe whispered. "He's tiny." "Not for a baby," Caleb said. "He's nearly 2 feet long and weighs 9 pounds if he weighs an ounce." "Like I said, tiny." But Wolfe took the sleeping baby in his hands and looked at it with a gentleness that softened the hard lines of his face. When the baby's eyes opened sleepily, Wolfe's breath came out in a wondering sound. "Look at those tawny eyes. He's your son, all right." The baby studied Wolfe with unfocused eyes, yawned, blew a tiny bubble, and was asleep within seconds. Wolfe laughed very softly and touched the baby's small, perfect cheek with his thumb. Watching Wolfe brought Jessica a feeling close to pain. She had seen the wonder in Wolfe's face when he looked from the baby's golden eyes to Caleb's. She had seen something more, too. She had seen Wolfe's hunger to someday hold a baby in his hands and know that he was part of that continuing miracle of life. A man didn't need titles or wealth in order to want a child. The pain of the realization was so deep that Jessica barely managed not to cry out. "Are you going to be as hard-headed and decent as your daddy?" Wolfe asked the baby softly. "I hope so. The world needs more dark angels of justice to keep the devils in line." Wolfe looked up and smiled at Caleb. "All the same, I hope you have a daughter next time. The world needs more Western women, too." "Have one yourself," Caleb said dryly. Only Jessica saw the light leave Wolfe's eyes. His black lashes swept down as though he were looking at the sleeping baby once more. She knew he must be thinking of their marriage, the trap he was caught in which ensured he would never have daughters or sons. Yet when Wolfe looked up again and handed the baby to Willow, there was a smile on his face. The smile was as real as the pain had been. "You made a beautiful baby," Wolfe said to Willow. "I had some help." "Damn little. A man as ugly as Caleb can't make a pretty baby." Willow smiled and looked at Caleb. "My husband is as handsome as a god." "To you, maybe," Wolfe said dryly. "To me? Well, I'll just say I've seen better-looking things left on the ground after a buffalo herd walked past." Caleb snickered. Wolfe turned around and gave the other man a swift, hard hug, brother to brother. "Before this, you had the sun," Wolfe said. "Now you have the moon and stars. Guard them well." After a moment, Jessica looked away, for she could no longer bear the sadness she sensed beneath Wolfe's pleasure for his friend. Chapter 15. She was naked on a vast plain of ice. Nothing was alive. Nothing moved but the many-voiced wind. Far ahead of her grew a powerful, living tree that carried safety in its branches. She must reach the tree's shelter. Yet the harder she tried to run, the more deeply encrusted she became in ice. She was a prisoner of cold and a plaything of the wind. Yet still she struggled toward the tree while the wind taunted her. That woman is not Jessica. Worst mistake of his life. All wrong for each other. Jessica sat bolt upright in bed, just as the first light of dawn brought color to the empty sky. "Jessie!" Wolfe's hand touched her shoulder. "Are you having nightmares about the past again?" "No, not the past." "Get back under the covers. Wolfe said gently. "It's cold out there." "It's freezing," she whispered. Jessica lay down and turned toward Wolfe, needing his warmth to chase the chill of her own dreams. "What is it?" he asked, stroking her hair. "A nightmare, that's all. I was alone." "You're not alone now. I'm here." "But for how long?" Wolfe felt Jessica's arms go around his neck, the softness of her breasts pressed against his naked chest. He had awakened from his own dreams already aroused. The feel of her against his skin brought his need to the point of pain. When she shifted, trying to come even closer, her hip brushed against his hardened flesh. He felt as much as heard her gasp. "Don't be frightened," Wolfe said. "I've spent a lot of nights like this, and I haven't forced you. I never will. All I have to do is remember how terrified you are by a man's need and why, and I have no problem at all controlling myself." "It's not that. You just startled me." Jessica took a slow, almost secret breath, trying to banish her dream. She rubbed her cheek against Wolfe's reassuring warmth, letting it sink through the chill left by the voices of the wind repeating Wolfe's words, telling her how little she was worth as a woman. When she felt Wolfe withdrawing from her, she made a broken sound and clung to him with a strength that surprised him. "Don't let go of me," she whispered urgently. "I thought I was frightening you." She shook her head. The motion sent a silky fall of hair over Wolfe's chest. "Are you certain?" he asked. "Very." Slowly, Wolfe put his arms back around Jessica and pulled her close once more. She relaxed against him despite the stark evidence of his arousal. For a few minutes there was silence but for the wind coiling through the spreading light of dawn. "Wolfe?" He made a questioning, rumbling sound. "Seeing Willow—" Jessica hesitated, not knowing how to give words to what she was feeling. "The birth was—" Wolfe kissed Jessica's forehead. "It brought back the nightmares, didn't it? Don't worry, they'll fade. Even under the best circumstances, birth is a messy process. With your memories of the past, it must have been horrifying." "That's not what I meant. Yes, birth is messy, but so is spring. One doesn't get an omelet without breaking shells and all that." Wolfe smiled as he nuzzled the hollow of Jessica's cheek. "Did I remember to tell you how very brave you are, Jessie?" "I'm a ruddy little coward, and no one knows it better than you." The bleakness in Jessica's voice surprised him. Wolfe tilted her face up so that he could see her eyes. "That's not true," Wolfe said simply. "You've endured things that would have broken most adults, much less a child." Saying nothing, Jessica closed her eyes and shook her head. "Jessie," Wolfe whispered, kissing her eyelids. "You had every right to run and hide on the nights your father raped your mother, but you didn't. You went to your mother and gave her what help you could." "So little." "So much," he countered. "You must have been terrified beyond words, yet you gave comfort to the very woman who should have been comforting you." "There was no comfort in her. Toward the end, I think she was mad." Wolfe closed his eyes. "It would have been a blessing." "Yes, but it left me very much alone. I expected to die when cholera took her. I was so sick. Then he came and bathed me and fed me thin gruel and kept me warm until cholera took him, too." "He?" "The Lord, my Father. Everyone else was dead or dying. I tried to help him, but finally the wind took him, too. I think he welcomed it." Wolfe made a low sound. "You were so young. It tears my heart to think of you alone and frightened." "I'd always been that way," Jessica said matter-of-factly, "until you came. I tried to keep you from seeing what a coward I was, but you knew anyway." "Hush," he said, kissing her eyelashes. "A coward would have run from the house and left Willow to bear her child alone. You didn't. Despite your horrible memories, you stayed by Willow's side and kept your fear to yourself. Caleb said you were as calm as a doctor." "Fear would only have made it more difficult for Willow. I couldn't do that to her." A sound came from Jessica that wasn't quite laughter, nor yet tears. "You were right about her, Wolfe. She is a rare and wonderful woman. Sharing her son's birth made me less fearful." Smiling, Wolfe stroked the back of his fingers down Jessica's cheek. She turned her head slowly until she could catch his index finger between her lips. The swift intake of his breath as she tasted his skin told her that she had his full attention. "Caleb taught me something, too," Jessica said. "Did he?" The soft warmth of Jessica's tongue between Wolfe's fingers made him forget to breathe. "Seeing Caleb with his son," she said, "made me realize there's more to having heirs than passing on titles and estates." Wolfe barely registered the meaning of the words. Jessica was biting him so delicately that he might have imagined it, but even in his dreams he hadn't felt the tiny serrations of her teeth caressing him. "You taught me something, too," Jessica continued. "Again," he whispered. "What?" "Bite me again, Elf." Smiling, she dragged her teeth lightly down the sensitive edges of his finger. When she reached the base, she thrust the tip of her tongue between his fingers. "I didn't teach you that," he said huskily. "No, you taught me something much more important." "Did I?" "Yes," she whispered. "I saw the awe and the hunger in you for a child of your own. Let me give you that child." He became utterly still. "Love me, Wolfe. Let me love you. Let me give back to you just a part of the beauty you've given to me." "Jessie," he whispered, stopping her words with a gentle pressure of his thumb. "It's all right. You don't have to repay me that way." "I want to." He smiled sadly. "You woke up terrified by old dreams." "Not old dreams. A new one." "Do you remember it?" "Dear God, all too clearly. You were gone and I was alone, and the wind was taunting me with my worthlessness as a wife, as a woman." Wolfe's arms tightened. "You aren't worthless." "Then why won't you make our marriage a valid one?" "Jessie." "Elf." She waited, watching him with hope burning in her eyes like dawn. "Sweet girl," Wolfe whispered, kissing Jessica between words. "It has nothing to do with worth or lack of it. There is no future for a Scots aristocrat and a half-breed bastard. You were not born for the western wilderness. I was. I wasn't born for the elegant drawing rooms of London. You were. You need a husband more civilized than I am, and I—" His voice died. "Someday you'll admit our mismatch and ask for an annulment." When Jessica opened her mouth to object, Wolfe took it in a deep kiss that made her moan. "But until that day," he whispered when he finally lifted his head, "we can enjoy each other in ways that will leave your virginity intact for the Lord whom you will finally accept as your husband in every sense of the word." "I'll never accept any man but you." "Yes, you will," Wolfe countered softly. "You have too much passion in you to live a nun's life, and you know it now. God help me, so do I. I'll die remembering your scent, your taste, the sounds you made when you burned beneath my mouth." Before Jessica could speak, Wolfe kissed her deeply, seducing her with hot movements of his tongue. When he cupped her breasts in his hands and drew out the velvet peaks with his circling thumbs, she made a broken sound at the back of her throat. Reluctantly, Wolfe lifted his head, afraid that he had frightened Jessica with his ardor. "Fear or pleasure?" he asked huskily. "What?" she asked, dazed by the heat splintering through her. His hands moved, and the heat became a sweet burning that made her arch toward him. Small sounds rippled from her lips. One of those sounds was his name. "Wolfe?" "Never mind," he breathed. His fingers caressed the hardened tips of Jessica's breasts, drawing her nipples into proud, hungry crowns. "Your body is telling me everything I need to know just now." Her thoughts came unraveled as a golden incandescence splintered through her. She felt the warm wash of Wolfe's breath over her nipple and knew in another instant he would draw her into his mouth and she would be lost. "Wait," she said breathlessly. "I want—" When she tried to speak, she couldn't find the words for what she wanted to say. "It's all right," Wolfe murmured, rubbing his lips over the velvet hardness of her nipple. "I know what you want. I want it too." "Do you?" The real question in Jessica's voice stopped Wolfe. Slowly, reluctantly, he lifted his head from the sensuous temptation of her nipple. "Didn't you know?" he whispered. "I like this as much as you do." "Not quite." "You sound positive," Wolfe said, amused. Jessica's cheeks were flushed with more than dawn, but she spoke anyway, for a need greater than the pleasures of the moment was driving her. "If you keep caressing me, you'll give me the sun," she said. The sensual promise in Wolfe's eyes was as dark and hot as his smile. "I hope so, Jessie. I love watching you burn." "But I don't know how to give the sun back to you." For a moment, Wolfe said nothing. He couldn't. His heart was threatening to close his throat. "Do you want to know how?" he asked finally. "Is it possible? Can I give you the sun?" "It's not only possible. It would be so damned easy. Just the thought of your hands." A primal tremor of response raked through Wolfe. "My hands? Where, Wolfe? How?" "Teach me." The temptation was almost overwhelming. He had spent too much time on fire for Jessica. He didn't think he could feel her hands on him without losing control, yet he couldn't bear the thought of repulsing her at the very instant he was feeling the greatest pleasure. "My response might disgust you," Wolfe said simply. "You don't have to, Elf. Despite our complaints, no man has ever died of sexual frustration." "Did my response disgust you?" Jessica asked curiously. His smile was slow and lazy, yet his eyes smoldered with memories. "I've never seen anything more beautiful than you burning." Jessica's hands slid into Wolfe's hair, pulling his head down for the kind of kiss he had taught her both to enjoy and to need. He responded with a searching hunger that aroused her as much as his hands on her breasts. "Teach me how to make you burn," she breathed. Wolfe drew her hands from his hair, kissed her palms, closed his teeth over the edge of her hand almost fiercely, and let out a harsh breath. "I think we had better go slowly. That way you may stop any time you want." Wolfe looked up, pinning her with eyes that were clear and dark. "I mean it, Jessie. The thought of disgusting you is unbearable to me." Tears burned in Jessica's eyes as she understood once again how badly she had wounded him by saying that his touch disgusted her. "Never, Wolfe. You could never disgust me." "I'll bet I can shock you," he said dryly. She smiled with lips that trembled. "My dearest Wolfe, you have already shocked me to my soul." Black eyebrows lifted in silent query. "Every time you touch me, it gives me the most shocking pleasure," she said simply. Wolfe's breath came in with a sharp sound. "Do I really, Jessie?" She held out her hand so that he could see its fine trembling. "This isn't fear or disgust. This is what happens when you touch me or when I remember how you have touched me." Gently, Wolfe lifted Jessica's hand to his mouth, kissed her, then let her fingers slide away. "Why don't you start by touching me everywhere you like being touched?" he suggested. Jessica tilted her head to one side as she looked at Wolfe. Though the sheet covered him from the waist down, he was unmistakably and aggressively male. When she looked back up to his intent eyes, the smile she gave him was both sensual and mischievous. "I fear I must point out a small problem." She flushed slightly and cleared her throat of its sudden huskiness. "Well, not small. Actually, it's quite extensive." "What is it?" Wolfe's teasing, lazy smile made Jessica feel as though he were stroking her. The sensation was both delicious and somewhat unnerving. "For a man who's reputed to have the eyes of an eagle when looking over a rifle barrel," she muttered, "I fear you are somewhat blind at close range." "How so?" he asked, measuring the heightened color in her cheeks. "And you call me innocent? Have you not yet noticed, my Wolfe? We're not quite the same everywhere, which will make it difficult for me to carry out your suggestion of touching you where it pleases me to be touched." "We both have ears," Wolfe pointed out blandly. "Does this mean I finally get to bite yours?" Before Wolfe could answer, he felt the warmth of Jessica's breath on his ear, the heat of her tongue, the delicate edge of her teeth. He made a low sound of pleasure as her tongue spiraled down and in, sending sweet chills over his spine. She lifted her head and saw the dark glittering of his eyes in the dawn. "You like that," she said. He smiled rather fiercely. "Yes." "Lovely," she murmured, bending to him once more. "So did I." Jessica tested the difference between ear and lobe with her tongue, her teeth, her lips. When she had managed to draw another low sound from Wolfe, she kissed him gently behind one ear. "We both have necks," she said against his. "What?" "Necks," Jessica repeated. "We both have them. I like the feel of your mouth on my neck. Does that mean you—" "Yes," he interrupted swiftly. "Please." Smiling, she shifted, not noticing that the front of her gown had come half undone beneath Wolfe's fingers. White lace fell open, revealing her breasts just as she discovered the strong tendons and resilient muscles of Wolfe's neck. He was as hard as polished wood, yet much more supple. Life coursed through him tangibly. "Your neck is so much stronger than mine." "I haven't your petal softness," Wolfe agreed. "Bite me, Alf. Let me feel your teeth and your warm little tongue. You won't hurt me." An instant later he felt the edge of Jessica's teeth testing him. Her willingness to please him was as arousing as the caress itself. Knowing he shouldn't trust himself to touch her at all, Wolfe drew her gown away from one breast and looked at her. His index finger circled the creamy skin just at the point where it began to gather into the rosy velvet of her nipple. Jessica shivered, and her teeth closed a bit savagely on the corded muscles of Wolfe's neck. Heat shot through him. He caught the responsive tip of her breast in his fingers and twisted with exquisite care. She made a ragged sound and drew her fingernails down his chest. When she felt the tiny, hard rise of his nipples, she hesitated, then circled back to test the nubs she had drawn so unexpectedly from his muscular chest. "Yes, we both have breasts," Wolfe said, smiling, despite the hot wires of need that were drawing his muscles into knots. "But yours are wonderfully soft and silky." "I like yours better." Slender fingers moved over Wolfe's chest, kneading the pads of muscle, praising his strength and silence, enjoying the midnight swirls of hair, circling without touching the sensitive nipples. Then her head bent, sending a wave of rose-scented hair over him. Just before her lips touched him, he saw the tip of her tongue. With the delicate curiosity of a kitten, she tasted his nipple. His fingers speared through her hair, holding her close. Her tongue flicked over him again. "Remember how I kissed you?" he asked almost roughly. "Yes." "Did you like it?" Her laugh was as sensual as the heat of her tongue. "Are you saying you would like to be kissed that way?" "Only if you want." Jessica's answer was a change in the caress, her lips opening over him, teasing and pleasing him with the shifting pressures of her mouth. Her teeth closed gently on him. The tightening of his body was both a reward and a lure. She covered his nipple with her mouth and sucked gently. He made a sound that was as much felt as heard, a breaking of breath, a speeding of his heartbeat, and a flush of warmth spreading beneath his skin that told her she had pleased him. An answering thrill coursed through Jessica. She would never have guessed that her touch could have such an effect on Wolfe's powerful body. Nor would she have guessed that touching him would both please and excite her. But it did. She found herself wanting to touch him everywhere, all at once, to fill her senses with him until there was nothing except Wolfe in her whole world. Murmuring sounds that had no meaning, Jessica drew first one cheek and then the other over Wolfe's chest, caressing him, tasting him, savoring his warmth and strength, losing herself in his male textures, realizing finally that this was what she had wanted to do for so long she couldn't remember when the wanting had first begun. Now he was lying beneath her hand, and she was dizzy with the power of him. When Jessica's hand slid down the sheet to stroke Wolfe's clenched thighs, his hips moved hungrily. Remembering how she had caught fire when his hand moved between her legs, she eased her fingers beneath the sheet, wanting to give him the same intense pleasure she had known at his touch. Yet when she tried to slide her fingers from knee to thigh, his legs were too closely held to permit it. "Don't you want me to touch you?" Jessica asked. Wolfe didn't trust his voice. He simply shifted his legs and prayed that his self-control was as good as he had always believed it to be. The male flesh, Jessica found, was utterly foreign, twin weights resting on her palm, and all of him drawn tight and hard, so sensitive that Wolfe's breath was torn from his mouth when she touched him experimentally. Instantly she tried to retreat. His hand closed over hers, tangling her in the sheet, holding her palm cupped closely against him while fire burned through his body. Then Wolfe realized what he had done. "Forgive me," he said raggedly. "I didn't mean to force something you didn't want." Gently, Jessica kissed the taut skin of Wolfe's waist just above the line of the sheet. "I want to touch you. I just don't know how. And from what you taught me my 15th summer, For all your hardness, a man is vulnerable there." "What? Oh," Wolfe said, remembering. "That savage little gutter trick." "That little gutter trick saved me from Lord Gore." "What do you mean?" "He threw me against the wall so hard I hadn't the breath to groan, much less to scream the house down around his ears as I wanted. If I hadn't used my knee as you taught, I'd have been raped on the hall floor just like my mother." "Jessie." Wolfe half lifted himself so that he could see her face. What he saw was creamy, half-covered breasts, hair on fire with the dawn, and a sweet mouth so close to his aching flesh that he could feel each of her breaths as a current of warmth soaking through the sheet. He stroked a strand of the long mahogany hair that fanned across his chest. "Your hand is trembling," she whispered. "Yes," he said huskily. "You keep surprising me. You have little reason to trust men, yet you are more generous in your sensuality than any woman I've ever known. Only with you. You have never been as other men to me. You are my Lord Wolfe, tree that stands alone, the man who talks back to thunder on behalf of a frightened elf." Jessica kissed him softly where sheet and skin met. The brush of his fingertips over her lips made her shiver with memories. "You have another name as well," she said. "I know. The Viscount Savage." "No." She bit the taut skin of Wolfe's belly in sensuous punishment. "Never a savage. To me your true name is Takes Me to the Sun." Wolfe wondered distantly how many more times Jessica would surprise him, and then she astonished him by drawing down the sheet and kissing the very different flesh that she had aroused. The kiss was as delicate as the brush of a butterfly's wing, and it burned as nothing Wolfe had ever felt in his life, until Jessica lifted her hair and let it settle over him. He felt each silky strand as a separate sliding caress, concealing and then revealing him in the same endless, searing instant. "Teach me how to touch you," Jessica whispered, stroking Wolfe very lightly with her hands. "Tell me where you are most sensitive." Her name shivered from Wolfe's lips. It was all he could say as he fought to control the primal pulses that were dragging him to the brink of ecstasy. For the space of several breaths, he struggled, not realizing that Jessica was watching him with eyes made smoky by passion. Finally, he let out a long, shuddering sigh. "You take the breath from me," Wolfe said. "Then I'll give you mine." Jessica lifted her face to his, breathing his name into his mouth as they shared a kiss that burned with leashed hunger. Slowly his hands closed over hers, drawing them across his aching body. With a soft, ragged sound of anticipation, she kissed the corner of his mouth, the pulse beating so strongly in his neck, the muscular swell of his chest. And all the while her hands hovered just above his fiercely aroused flesh, touching him only with her warmth. When Wolfe finally could speak, his voice was a rasp that told Jessica how tightly drawn he was. "Touch me here, where I ache for you," he said, pressing one small hand between his legs. Jessica cupped and caressed him very gently, sensing the wildness quivering in him. Slowly he drew her hand higher, wrapping it around his potent flesh, urging her to measure him from base to blunt satin tip. "There," Wolfe said hoarsely. "There, I am very sensitive. It's there I would feel the shivering of your ecstasy most clearly." Jessica made an odd sound and ran her fingers over his different textures with both curiosity and gentle care. Wolfe felt the trembling of her hands beneath his and smiled darkly. "Is there anything else you want to know?" he asked. "Yes," she whispered. "What is it?" "I want to know how it would feel to have you inside me." "That can't be. But this, yes. I need your hands, Jessie. I've never needed like this." Her hands moved, and pleasure coursed heavily through Wolfe. She kissed the muscular curve of his thigh, the sleek warmth of his abdomen, the intriguing hollow of his navel. Eyes glittering, half closed, Wolfe watched her, loving him in the only way he would allow. The hushed silence of the room expanded until it became as taut as the instant before lightning arced between sky and earth. The clear pleasure Jessica took in Wolfe's body, and her utter lack of fear, almost undid him. It took a fierce effort of will for him not to grab her and return the intimate caresses. But he knew if he touched her, he wouldn't stop until he was buried in her, feeling her ecstasy shivering around him, hurling him into the sun. Wolfe's fingers clenched in the ends of Jessica's long hair as he felt her warm mouth caressing his skin. Then he could watch her no longer. He could only close his eyes and fight the violent need that threatened to overpower him. Of all the sensual things he had dreamed about his elf, the possibility of her taking such open, heated pleasure in his body hadn't been one of them. Never had he been more aroused or felt more his own power as a man. Then Jessica's tongue skimmed his blunt arousal. He made the sound of a man in torment. Her head turned swiftly toward him, sending her hair over him in silky fire. As lightly as a sigh, as hot as flame, her hair settled between his thighs. A visible shudder ripped through him. "Wolfe, did I hurt you?" He smiled, despite talons of need drawing his body on a rack. "Did I ever make you ache?" She nodded. The movement sent sensual fire coursing over his erect flesh. He barely suppressed a groan. "Sweet Jessie, it hurts only when you stop." "But how do I touch you now? We are so different." "I've never asked that from a woman." Wolfe looked at Jessica with eyes that were dark blue gems burning. That kind of intimacy is too much to ask of an innocent elf. "Is it shameful of me to admit I'd rather be wanton than innocent? I find I'm quite curious." "And I find I've never been more aroused. I wonder how much more I can take." Wolfe drew a deep breath and let it out slowly. "We'll learn together." "This can't be new to you." He smiled ruefully. "But it is." "Your duchesses." "Hammer the duchesses," Wolfe said roughly. "They weren't mine, nor was I theirs. I was a savage trophy for them. Not one of them gave Tinker's damn for anything but cold-hearted rotting. Not one of them ever gave me half the sweet pleasure you have." "I have," Jessica whispered. "By touching you where you're most different." Wolfe smiled and stroked his thumb over her lips, the only way he would permit himself to touch her. "That, and earlier, when you went down my body as though I were a warm spring and you were bathing in me." "But you are." Jessica drew her cheek against the hard masculine flesh that defined Wolfe's hunger. "And I am." "Bathing in me?" "Yes." She turned her head and caressed him with her other cheek. "Keep that up," he said in a thick voice, "and there will be as much fact as metaphor in what you say." Jessica paused, then smiled secretly as she understood. "That would be only fair." "No." "Yes." Her head moved again, but this time it was her mouth that caressed him rather than her cheek. Did you not bathe in me?" Wolfe groaned something in Cheyenne as his whole body clenched. "You are very hard, my Wolfe." The sound he made wasn't recognizable as a word, which was just as well. He was certain the word would have shocked her. "You're very warm," she whispered, testing his heat with the tip of her tongue. "You are a tease," he said in a thick voice. "Am I? Your blood is running heavily. I can feel it." Jessica trembled with the answering rush of her own blood. "It beats more fiercely here than in your neck." Wolfe didn't answer. He couldn't. He had never imagined how violently exciting it might be to experience his body through Jessica's eyes, her hands, her words. Then the gentle, curious, incendiary heat of her mouth discovered him. With a murmuring sound of pleasure and surprise, she surrounded him. Wolfe's fingers clenched deeply in the covers as a wave of unspeakable pleasure exploded through him. He fought to control the wild pulses of his release, but even as he fought, he knew he would quickly lose. Wolfe barely had enough strength to drag Jessica back up his body and bury his tongue in her mouth. Then he tasted himself and her and groaned as though he were being torn apart. The leap and shudder of his flesh beneath her hand awed Jessica. She felt the spreading, silky heat of Wolfe's fulfillment and knew that she was touching the beginning of life itself. She returned his kiss fiercely, wishing that life within her. "I didn't mean to shock you like that," he said when he could draw a whole breath again. "When you kissed me so intimately, I all but lost control." "You didn't shock me." "Bloody hell, I didn't. You tasted me." "Yes," Jessica whispered. "That was the best of all. You taste like tears, only more silky and mysterious." Her words went through Wolfe like dawn through night, transforming and renewing him in the space of a single rushing breath. "You're going to be the death of me, Alf," Wolfe said huskily, rolling over until he had Jessica caged between his body and the bed. "But first, I'm going to be the death of you." Jessica didn't understand until she felt Wolfe's mouth on her breast and his hand sliding down her body to seek the scented petals of the flower that opened only for him. She was already sleek, sultry, hungry, for pleasuring him had aroused her. The first brush of his fingers made her gasp. The second made her cry out. The third sent a silky heat spreading between them. The fourth sent her to the sun. Chapter 16. Although Wolfe's expression had been rather grim when he came in from outdoors, the sight of his wife spooning chili into a big serving bowl made him pause. The slow, very male smile he gave her as he peeled off his leather work gloves told Jessica that he was remembering what had happened between them in the hushed silence of dawn 3 days ago, and every night since. As Wolfe took the big bowl from Jessica, he slid the palms of his hands over the back of her fingers. Because there were other people nearby, he didn't bend to take her soft mouth in a kiss, but he wanted to. And the catch in her breathing when his palms touched her skin told Wolfe that Jessica wanted the kiss as much as he did. "How's the little man doing?" Wolfe asked Willow, turning away from the temptation of Jessica's mouth. Willow looked up from the shallow basin where she was carefully bathing the baby, who seemed to be enjoying the warm water and his mother's touch. "Ethan Caleb Black is doing wonderfully well," Willow said, smiling. "Ethan, huh? You finally decided?" "It was Caleb's father's name." "Big shoes for the little one to fill," Wolfe said. He looked appraisingly at Willow. "Are you sure you should be up and working so soon?" "Lying in bed is for people who are sick. I'm not." Frowning, Jessica looked up from the pan of cornbread that was staying warm near the stove. "In England, the women stay in confinement for several weeks after giving birth," Jessica pointed out. "Figures," Wolfe said. His voice was rich with disgust for the aristocrats of Great Britain. "The whole lot of them is as useless as teats on a boar hog." All Willow said was, "The longer you stay in bed, the weaker you are when you get up." "You look tired," Jessica persisted. "I've been a lot more tired. Ask Caleb." She picked up Ethan and wrapped his bottom in a soft cotton diaper as she continued talking. "Ethan and I had a nice long nap this morning, didn't we, Button? And after lunch, we're going to have another one." Wolfe shook his head, but it was in admiration rather than disagreement. "And here I thought that Cheyenne women were tough. Caleb must have been standing under a whole sky full of lucky stars the day he found you." Jessica bent over the pan of cornbread, rearranging the clean cotton towel so that no warmth could escape. The fussing wasn't necessary, but it gave her an excuse to hide her face until she was certain that none of the hurt she felt at Wolfe's comments would show in her expression. Even knowing that he hadn't meant his words as a backhanded slap didn't remove the sting of them. She had begun to hope that he was accepting their marriage. Since the night when Wolfe had discovered the source of her fear of men, marriage, and childbirth, he had been the affectionate companion of old. He had also been a restrained, generous teacher of the ancient arts of sensuality. But now Jessica realized Wolfe hadn't accepted her as his wife, nor was he likely to do so. His contempt for the aristocracy was as deep in him as his blood. Jessica had been born into that aristocracy. Wolfe never forgot that, not even when in the grip of a passion for her that made him shake. It was why, after 3 nights of the most intense, sensual explorations, Jessica was still a virgin. She was born of the aristocracy, which made her the kind of woman with whom Wolfe might play sensuous games, but not the kind of woman he thought was fit to be his true mate. The wind flexed against the house, testing its strength and reminding the men inside of what awaited them after they had eaten. A faint scratching sound came from the windows, particles of ice or grit flung against the glass by the strengthening wind. As one, the men stopped eating and exchanged wary looks. Without a word, Wolfe stood and went to the back door. Ignoring the ice-tipped wind, he walked away from the house until he had a clear view of the sky around the mountain peaks. The air had an odd sheen to it. The wind was alive, potent, and smelled of winter. Although it was barely noon, the elemental harmonies of wolf packs on the prowl shivered through the forest. Motionless, silent, Wolfe stood and absorbed all the subtle messages of sky and earth, wind and wildlife. When he turned and came back inside, his face was impassive and his eyes were bleak. Caleb watched Wolfe sit down. "Well?" he asked softly. Wolfe hesitated, then shrugged. The truth would come on the wind, no matter what was said or not said now. "It's making up to snow." Caleb muttered something Jessica chose not to overhear. Quietly, she set down another pan of warm cornbread and a bowl of chili. "How hard?" Caleb asked. "It's going to be a real hellbringer." Wolfe's voice was very soft, but very certain. "Then nobody rides but me. It's too easy to get lost in a blizzard." "I'll start bringing in the cows and calves," Rafe said, ignoring Caleb. "My bullwhip makes the horses too skittish, but it works like a charm on those cattle." "I'll ride shotgun for you," Reno said. "Thank God not too many calves have been born yet. They'll be a lot safer in their mothers' bellies. Have the mares started foaling yet?" "No," Wolfe said. "My steel dust will probably be the first. Once she foals, the rest won't be far behind. When they start dropping their foals in a blizzard..." Caleb narrowed his eyes but said nothing. There was nothing he could say that would turn back the cold northern wind. "Once we get a rope on my Mustang," Wolfe continued, "Ishmael will make sure the rest of the herd follows." "Hell," Caleb said in disgust. "The last time I tried roping that steel dust of yours, she ran rings around me. Quick little thing, isn't she? Smart, too." Wolfe's smile faded. "If I can't talk to her—" "Talk?" interrupted Jessica. Caleb smiled oddly. "In Cheyenne. It's the damnedest thing I ever saw. Wolfe can go up to a Mustang and talk to it, and half the time it'll follow him like a big dog." "That's what the Cheyenne call them, big dogs," Wolfe said dryly. His voice changed. "If the steel dust won't listen to reason and we can't get close enough to rope her, I'll have to try creasing her with a bullet." Jessica looked unhappily at Wolfe. She knew the steel dust was the core of the horse herd he hoped to build. "I'll do what I have to," Wolfe said. By the third day of the blizzard, the men were exhausted from lack of sleep and long hours spent riding under the most miserable conditions imaginable. Jessica made gallons of stew, rafts of cornbread, and lakes of coffee. She kept all of it hot in the kitchen, no matter what the hour, for she never knew when one of the men would walk in the back door shivering with cold and hungry as a spring bear. "Go back to bed," Jessica said to Willow. "You've been up cooking since dawn. It's late afternoon now. You must be exhausted." "I'm fine. I'm stronger than I look. I always have been." Willow looked at Jessica's drawn face and understood what was bothering her. "The men will be all right, Jessie. They're used to riding wild country." A tight nod was Jessica's only answer. She didn't know how much Caleb had told his wife about the problems they were having with so many wolves prowling in the storm, with the contrary cattle, and with cows calving at the worst possible time. Not to mention the wind itself, edged with thousands of icy teeth that ripped into flesh and stole the very warmth of life from livestock and man alike. But Jessica knew all of those problems, for Wolfe had told her more than he knew with his terse answers and eloquent silences. "If only the bloody wind would stop," Jessica said suddenly. "Yes, if only. At least it's not snowing anymore," Willow said, walking to the window. She picked up the spyglass she had put there. In the magnified circle of its view, she looked across the pasture, counting horses under her breath. It was impossible to be certain through the waist-high curtains of snow, but she thought the count came up short. "What is it?" Jessica asked, coming to stand by Willow. "At least 4 of the mares are missing. Ishmael will bring them back." "Not if they're foaling," Willow whispered. "No stallion will disturb a mare when she quits the herd to give birth." There was a tense silence before Willow added, "I saw at least one wolf. The packs are moving again." For an instant Jessica closed her eyes. She had seen Willow's Arabians when they were brought to the home pasture. Even heavy with their unborn foals and thick with winter coats, the mares had an elegance of form and movement that enchanted Jessica. The thought of those mares lying down in the cruel wind to give birth, while wolves circled hungrily around, made her feel ill. The mares would be all but helpless, captive of the need to give birth. For a time, they would be almost as vulnerable as the foals being pushed from warm wombs onto frozen ground. "The foals," Jessica whispered. Willow looked through the spyglass, saying nothing. "Can you see any of the men?" Jessica asked. "No. They're probably combing the forest for cows. When the wind started coming from the northeast before dawn, the herd drifted out of Eagle Creek Basin." With growing tension, Jessica waited while Willow searched as much as she could see of the pasture through the swirling snow. When she collapsed the spyglass with barely restrained violence, Jessica knew that the mares were still missing. "I don't see the steel dust anywhere," Willow said finally. "I think the foaling has begun." "Dear God, no," Jessica whispered. "We can't lose the steel dust now." Wolfe was so relieved when she came to him, as though she understood he would keep her safe. Willow set aside the spyglass. "I nursed Ethan a few minutes ago. If he cries before I come back, just—" "No!" The curt refusal startled Willow. "Stay with your baby," Jessica said tightly. "I'll check on the mares." "I can't let you do that. The cold is too dangerous." "That's why you're staying with Ethan. If anything happens to you, the baby will die. If anything happens to me—" Jessica paused and then spoke the bitter truth with no bitterness in her voice. "No one else will die of it." Willow clasped her hands together until the knuckles gleamed whitely. "Jessie, you mustn't go out. You don't know what this mountain wind is like, how quickly it can take the living warmth from you." "I know about cold and wind. I've seen sheep freeze standing up in the fields and wells frozen from top to bottom like stone." Willow's eyes widened into startled hazel pools. "I didn't know England was so cold." "It isn't. Scotland is. Do you have winter clothing that would fit me?" "Jessie, do you or not?" "In the bedroom. I'll show you." Willow smiled oddly. "Some of the clothes will be familiar. Caleb got them from Wolfe. They were yours. There's a shotgun over the front door. Take it. I'll bring you extra shells." Very quickly, Jessica was on the way out of the house, wrapped in layers of wool and buckskin that were familiar, and a hooded fur jacket that was not. She wore pants instead of a skirt and carried a borrowed shotgun. The pockets of her jacket were heavy with extra shells. The only horse in the corral that didn't look half dead on its feet from work was a tall black gelding. He didn't want to be bridled, saddled, or ridden. Jessica managed the first two, but was very nearly thrown before the horse gave up and left the corral with ears laid back. As she rode out into the storm, she was grateful that Wolfe had insisted that she learn to ride difficult horses and do the work of stable hands. Before Jessica reached the pasture, she saw the first of the wolves. They were sniffing the wind eagerly and moving as though they had a destination in mind. Acting on instinct, she followed. She lost the trail part way into the sparse forest. The wind was less brutal in the trees, but not by much. Just as Jessica was going to give up and go back to the pasture, she heard the unmistakable sound of a horse screaming in anger and fear. She spun the black gelding around and headed toward the sounds at a dead run, dodging branches and clinging to the saddle horn when the horse lunged through low spots where snow lay in powdery drifts. At first, Jessica saw only wolves. Then she saw the steel-dust mare trying to struggle to her feet in order to face the circling predators. Jessica brought the shotgun up and fired into the wolves. They scattered away, only to circle back to the mare almost instantly. Jessica fired again and again, reloading rapidly despite the clumsiness of her gloves. After the third shot, the wolves withdrew, vanishing into swirls of wind-blown snow. Jessica dismounted and went to the steel dust. The Mustang flinched and laid back her ears, but was too caught up in the ultimate moments of giving birth to resist the gentle hands helping her. As soon as the foal was born, Jessica sat down and pulled it into her lap so that the icy ground wouldn't sap the newborn's strength. Very quickly the Mustang was back on her feet and nosing curiously at the slick, wet bundle that overflowed Jessica's lap. A surprisingly long, agile pink tongue appeared and began a vigorous cleaning of the foal. When Jessica's hand or leg got in the way, it was cleaned, too. Suddenly the mare's head went up and her nostrils flared. She shied away but came back instantly, for the foal was a lure she couldn't refuse. She nickered urgently to her foal. In response, the foal tried to stand. With a few strategic pushes from Jessica, the foal managed to come to its feet, but very quickly went sprawling, its stilt-like legs sticking out every which way. As Jessica reached for it, a harsh male voice cut through the storm. "What the hell do you think you're doing out here? Southern lady, sometimes you don't have the sense God gave a goose." Before Jessica could say a single word, she was snatched off the ground by large hands. Instants later, she found herself staring eye to eye with a perfectly furious Caleb Black. There was no sign of the sensual lover, gentle father, or loving husband in him at the moment. He was a dark angel of justice with blazing gold eyes. "Jessie!" She smiled tentatively, but found her mouth too dry to speak. Caleb looked frankly intimidating. "Good grief," he said, still hardly able to believe his eyes. "Riding Deuce and wearing that fur jacket, I thought you were Willow. Does Wolfe know you're out in this hell wind?" The appearance of a multitude of slate-gray wraiths just at the edge of visibility saved Jessica from having to answer. Before she could take a breath, she was supported only by Caleb's left arm, and there was a 6-gun in his right hand. Shots came too quickly to count, their staccato thunder battering through the savage keening of the wind. Almost 100 feet away, a wolf went down and stayed. The rest vanished as silently as they had appeared. Jessica stared at Caleb, astonished at his speed and accuracy. Veiled by snow, the wolves had appeared with no warning and had left in the same way. Yet if the words Caleb was saying were any indication, he wasn't much impressed by either his quickness or his skill. "Damnation! How could I miss so many? Must be 30 of those sons of bitches prowling around." Caleb didn't bother putting Jessica down. He simply tossed her onto Deuce, reloaded his gun swiftly, and went to the struggling foal. When he came close, the steel dust's ears went back. "Take it easy, you cross-eyed cayuse. I'm gonna help your baby, not eat him." The mare's nostrils flared. Jessica had been infused with the foal's scent. Enough of it had rubbed off on Caleb to confuse the mare. Stamping her feet, lashing her tail, nickering nervously, she watched while Caleb picked up her foal and draped it over Jessica's lap. "Take him to a stall. The steel dust won't like it, but she'll follow." "At least 3 other mares are missing from the herd," Jessica said. With a hissed word under his breath, Caleb pulled on his gloves. "Never rains but it pours. Only a contrary female would have babies in this weather." "Leave it to a contrary male to complain about the fruits of last summer's frolic," Jessica retorted. Caleb gave a crack of laughter as he smacked Deuce on his muscular black haunch. "Get going, boy. Sassy little bits like your rider and that foal don't take long to freeze solid in this wind." "I'm not little," Jessica said as the big gelding headed out. "You know, Willow's been saying the same thing to me since I met her. Didn't believe it then. Don't believe it now. Watch Deuce. He doesn't like wind worth a damn." "I noticed. I'll be back for the other foals." "No, it's too dangerous with the wind and the wolves. You stay home. Reno isn't far behind me. We'll look for the missing mares." "But what about the cattle? You need them more than you need the foals, and most of the horses are Wolfe's anyway." Caleb didn't answer. Instead, he swung up onto his big horse with a quick motion and trotted off into the savage, waist-high swirls of snow. Beyond him, the herd of horses huddled miserably, their rumps to the icy wind. With the steel dust in anxious attendance, Jessica rode quickly to the barn. The Mustang didn't want to go inside, but she did, shying every inch of the way. Jessica put mother and foal in an empty stall, dragged in a bucket of water and an armload of hay, and hauled herself up on Caleb's tall horse once again. Deuce didn't want to leave the barn's shelter. After a sharp contest of wills with its rider, the big gelding laid back his ears and went out into the teeth of the hell wind once more. The sound of a 6-gun being fired told Jessica where to find Caleb. By the time she got there, the wolves were gone. Tall, wide-shouldered, standing with his back to her, Caleb straddled a newborn foal while he rapidly reloaded his six-gun and watched the sheets of wind-driven snow for the movement of hungry wolves. When he saw none, he holstered the gun with a smooth motion and bent to pick up the foal. The mare was much more tame than Wolf Steeldust. Other than nosing the foal insistently, she made no move to interfere. As though understanding that the man's attention wasn't on them anymore, wolves rushed in from three sides. Before Jessica could scream Caleb's name, he straightened, drew his gun, and fired all in the same motion, emptying the revolver in a few shattering seconds. The speed of his movements shocked Jessica, even though she had seen it once before. The wolves scattered, leaving two dark shadows behind. Instantly he began to reload. Then he heard something behind him and spun, gun raised in his left hand. Pale green eyes glittered like gems in the man's wind-burned face. In that instant, Jessica remembered what Wolfe had said about Reno and Caleb being well-matched when it came to speed and six-guns. "Willie, what the hell are you doing out here and riding Deuce of all horses? Does Caleb know what damn foolishness you're up to?" As Jessica urged her horse forward, the hood of her jacket was stripped back by the wind. Long mahogany locks whipped and leaped like flames in the late afternoon light. "Jessie, for God's sake, does Wolfe—" "Just give me the blasted foal before it freezes to the ground," Jessica interrupted curtly, tired of being told by tall, dangerous men that she belonged at home by the fire. "You need every hand you can get." Impatiently, she stuffed her hair back under the hood and pulled the drawstring tight. No sooner was she finished than Reno dropped a curly-coated, ice-tipped black foal across her lap. A big, rangy bay mare followed, all but stepping on Reno's heels. "Was it you with that shotgun earlier?" Reno asked. "Yes." "Did you reload?" "Wolfe taught me to hunt," she retorted. "What do you think?" Reno's smile flashed. "I think you reloaded. I've got your carbine. Want to trade?" "Unlike Wolfe, I can't shoot straight one-handed while riding a horse and hanging upside down with my eyes closed," Jessica said dryly. "I'll be better off with the shotgun. All I have to do is point it in the right general direction and pull the trigger." "You do that, Red. All the blood smell from the berths and that wild wind have every wolf pack between here and the divide in a frenzy. Must be 40 or 50 wolves prowling around. Damnedest thing I've ever seen. Shoot one and 3 more take its place." He smacked Jessica's horse on the rump. "Take her home, Deuce." Deuce moved eagerly toward the barn once more, followed by a mare that was nearly as big as he was. The foal struggled briefly, then gave up and lay quietly while the wind keened icily around. As soon as Deuce left the meager shelter of the pines, swirls of snow leaped up from the ground, stinging unprotected skin. The gelding tugged at the bit and humped his back as though intending to buck again. "Don't even think of it," Jessica muttered, curbing the big horse. Suddenly there were wolves everywhere. With a cry of fear, Jessica dropped the reins, lifted the shotgun, and fired at a leaping black shape. Simultaneously, Deuce lashed out with his hind feet, and the big bay mare charged at the closest wolf, forcing it to retreat. The mare spun back to the gelding. Instinctively, the horses protected their vulnerable hamstrings by turning their rumps to one another and facing the circling wolves. Jessica didn't urge Deuce to run for the barn. She, too, knew that the horse would be hamstrung and brought down long before it reached the barn's safety. While Deuce pivoted and struck out at wolves that were foolhardy enough to rush forward, Jessica fought to stay upright, keep the foal across the saddle, and reload the shotgun at the same time. Yet even when she succeeded in shoving in another shell, she knew it wouldn't get the job done. There were too many wolves. An eerie calm came over Jessica as she raised the shotgun to fire, for she knew it would be a race to see if she got the gun reloaded again before the wolves regrouped and closed in. If she lost that race, her only hope was that one of the men had heard the shotgun's distinctive bellow and would find her in time. She triggered the gun. Wolves scattered as buckshot fanned out like wind-driven hail. Some of the wolves leaped aside, snapping and snarling as though besieged by bees. Fighting to hold the foal and herself in the saddle, Jessica managed to get another shell into the gun before the wolves regained their courage. When she brought up the shotgun again, the foal began to slip off. Desperately, she held the foal in place while trying to level the shotgun at the wolf that was leading the attack, a big, slate-gray male that had been clever enough to recognize her shotgun as dangerous and leap aside as soon as she had pointed the barrel toward him. The big male raced forward before Jessica could bring the shotgun to bear again. Abruptly, he somersaulted and fell. He didn't get up. Even as the sound of rifle fire screamed down through the wind to Jessica, another animal spun away from the pack and lay still. Back at the edge of the trees, Wolfe took aim and shot again, picking off the animal that was closest to the horses. Despite the fear hammering at him, he shot smoothly, evenly, and accurately, using a hail of bullets to separate the carnivores from their intended prey. Too many wolves, he thought savagely. What in Christ's name was Caleb thinking about, letting Willow come out when there was a hell wind blowing? Suddenly, there were no more targets. The wolves had withdrawn again, vanishing like puffs of smoke on the violent wind. Reloading quickly, Wolfe rode out into the meadow. He saw Deuce head for the barn at a fast canter, with his rider crouched low in the saddle, hanging onto a foal. One of Caleb's big Montana mares followed anxiously. Even as Wolfe admired Willow's courage in taking on the hellwind and wolves, he wished things weren't so desperate that they needed every hand. But they were that desperate, and they did need every hand, even the soft one of a woman who should have been rocking a cradle rather than riding shotgun over a helpless foal. The wind finally died at sunset, bringing relief to men and animals alike. Mares with foals were in the barn, cows with newborn calves had been herded into the corral, and the men traded off riding around the rest of the livestock. The temperature rose with each circuit Wolfe made around the cattle. Another wind began to blow, a gentle wind from the south. By moonrise, the snow had begun to melt beneath the warm breath of the Chinook. Wolfe stood in the stirrups and looked out over the glistening land. He stretched and sighed deeply, weary to his core. "Go back to the house," Caleb called from the shadows. "The cattle can take it from here. Any creature that dies of being born in a warm wind is too weak to be worth saving. Besides, as tired as we are, we'd probably shoot ourselves instead of the wolves. They're gone. They won't gather like that again until another hell wind blows." The certainty in Wolfe's voice made coolness condense along Caleb's spine. He cocked his head and looked at the man he thought of as a brother, but didn't always understand. "How long will it be before another hell wind blows?" Caleb asked, curious. "My mother's mother saw one as a child. Your grandchildren might see one, if they live long enough. Hope they have friends like you to help them." "And wives like Willow," Wolfe said softly. Caleb didn't hear. He had already reined his horse away and was trotting toward the horse herd that Reno and Rafe were guarding. Wolfe turned toward the house where lights were glowing in welcoming shades of gold. Knowing how tired Willow must be, the last thing Wolfe expected when he walked into the house was to find it full of the savory scents of cooking. A pan of warm water was on the stove, along with a dry towel and soap. Smiling, he took the hint and began stripping off hat and gloves, heavy jacket and cold boots, vest and shirt and undershirt. He washed as much of himself as he could reach, enjoying the feel of the warm water and the dry towel. The sound of a woman's skirt rustling behind Wolfe told him that he wasn't alone any longer. Even as he turned around, his blood heated at the thought of catching Jessica and holding her close to his body again. She always smelled so good, so clean. Holding her was like lying in a rose garden in the full bloom of summer. But it was the scent of lavender rather than roses that met Wolfe. Willow smiled and held out a clean shirt to him. "If your clothes are anything like Caleb's have been, they could stand up and shoot for themselves." Wolfe put on the shirt, appreciating the clean softness and warmth of the flannel. He looked at the stew simmering gently on the stove and the mound of biscuits and shook his head in silent wonder. "They broke the mold with you, Willow. A new baby to take care of, yet you're washing clothes for 4 men and feeding them as well day and night, and in between you rescue foals and shoot wolves." Willow gave Wolfe an odd glance. "I'm with you as far as the new baby and the biscuits, but you lost me after that. Jessie did the rest, including the cooking. If any foals got rescued, it was her doing, not mine. All I did was lend her my clothes and a shotgun." "What are you talking about?" "Jessie. She was the one out in the storm, not me." Wolfe's eyes widened. His hands gripped Willow's shoulders hard enough to make her wince. "I saw you out there riding Deuce," he said flatly. "I saw a wolf leap for you, and you fired the shotgun and reloaded it while Deuce was dancing around and you were holding the foal across your lap, and I didn't know if I could shoot that goddamn wolf before he took you and the foal right down into the snow." "Jessie," Willow said succinctly. "Jessie and Jessie and Jessie." Wolfe released Willow and began walking quickly toward the bedroom he and Jessica shared. "If you're looking for your fancy aristocratic lady," Willow said dryly, "try the barn." Wolfe spun around. "What?" "Jessie was worried that wolves might get into the barn. She knows how much store you set by that savage steel dust Mustang. That's why Jessie rode out into the storm when I saw the mare was missing. That's why Jessie's in the barn now with a shotgun. She's guarding the future the same way I would have in her shoes." Wolfe stared at Willow, unable to believe what he was hearing. "I wanted to go," Willow continued. "Jessie wouldn't let me. She said if something happened to me, Ethan would die. But if something happened to her, nobody would die." "The little fool." "Is she? She may have been born and raised an aristocrat, but she's not the useless little decoration you believe she is." Willow was talking to herself. The door slammed behind Wolfe as he headed for the barn. Chapter 17. When the steel dust caught Wolfe's scent, she nickered softly in welcome. He leaned over the stall door and looked inside. The breath went out of him as though at a blow. Jessica was slumped in the far corner, asleep. The shotgun was propped against the wall within easy reach. A newborn blood bay foal was curled against her, taking advantage of shared warmth. Silence grew while Wolfe measured the changes between the girl who had danced with him in London and the girl he was looking at now. In London, Jessica's skin had been as fine-grained and flawless as a pearl. America hadn't been so kind. She had scratches and welts on one side of her face, and her cheeks were chapped by the wind. In London, her color had been vivid, almost incandescent. Now her lips were pale, and exhaustion ringed her eyes with darkness. It was only the beginning of the unhappy comparisons. In London, Jessica's hair had been as sleek and burnished as flame, and jewels had glinted from its intricately coiffed depths. Now her hair was wild, wind-tangled, and mixed with straw. In London, her clothes had been designed and executed in the most expensive materials available, and her skirts had billowed like clouds. In America, she wore a boy's flannel underwear, a boy's buckskin shirt and breeches, and the evidence of her assistance at several foalings was spread from her shoulders to her small, durable boots. In London, Jessica's days were composed of teas and balls, plays, and the latest books. In America, she worked like a scullery maid and stable hand combined. In London, she entertained her guests with wit and silver laughter. In America, she rarely laughed and had nearly died. Jessie, what have I done to you? There was no answer to Wolfe's silent, anguished question except the truth. He had almost killed the girl who trusted him when she trusted nothing else on earth. Making no sound, Wolfe went into the stall. He picked up the shotgun, took the shell from the firing chamber, and closed the gun. The small noise woke Jessica. She sat up with a start, automatically reaching for the corner where she had propped the shotgun out of the way. "It's all right, Jessie. The wolves are gone." She focused on Wolfe, blinked, and smiled sleepily. "All save one, and he's my very own Lord Wolfe. I'm safe with him." Pain went through Wolfe like black lightning, scoring his soul in ways he couldn't name. He could feel it, though, a kind of agony he had never known before. Jessica trusted him without reservation, yet he had brought nothing but unhappiness and harm to her. "My stupidity nearly killed you, Alf. When I think how close you came to being torn apart by wolves." "You're a fine shot," she murmured, sliding back into sleep. "I'm a fool." Though Wolfe's voice was harsh, he was very gentle as he lifted Jessica into his arms. When she realized he meant to carry her from the stall, she woke up in a rush. "Wait, you haven't even looked at the steel dust's foal," she protested. "She'll be a wonderful foundation mare for our herd. I've never seen so fine a head on a foal, nor such a deep chest. It's a filly. Isn't that grand? In a few years she—" "To hell with the steel dust and her filly both," Wolfe interrupted savagely. "Don't you understand? You could have died." Jessica blinked. "So could you." "That's different. It ends here, Jessie." "What?" "I'm taking you back to London as soon as the passes are safe." "Going to give that carriage another shot at me, is that it?" "What are you talking about?" Jessica smiled and nuzzled Wolfe's hard jawline. "I nearly got run down by a carriage in London, remember?" Wolfe's mouth flattened. "I remember." "You should. You beat that driver to within an inch of his life." "I would rather have killed the drunken bastard." "There are a lot more like him," Jessica pointed out. "So?" "So I'm no safer in London than I am here, am I?" The tip of Jessica's tongue drew a line of sensual fire down Wolfe's jaw. "That's not the point," he said roughly. "Then what is?" "I've nearly killed you trying to make you admit that you aren't cut from Western cloth. You're a British aristocrat, and you deserve to have the elegant life of ease for which you were bred, born, raised, and trained." As Wolfe spoke, he stepped out of the barn into the brilliant moonlight. The ground was cold and shiny with melting snow. The air was like warm silk. "Nonsense," Jessica said, yawning. "You wouldn't be happy in England." "That won't be a problem." Jessica went very still in Wolfe's arms. All sleepiness fled before the wave of unease that swept through her. "What are you saying?" she whispered. "I'll leave England as soon as our marriage is annulled." "I haven't agreed to and—" "You don't have to," Wolfe interrupted savagely. "I'll be the one to seek the annulment." "But why?" she whispered. "What have I done to make you hate me so?" "I don't hate you. I never have, even when I wanted to throttle you for trapping me into marriage." "Then why are—" Jessica got no farther in her question, for Wolfe's mouth descended on hers. By the time he lifted his head once more, both of them were breathing quickly, hungrily. "It's over, Jessie. It never should have begun." "Wolfe, listen to me," she said urgently. I want to be your wife in all ways. I want to live with you, work beside you, bear your children, care for you when you are ill, and laugh with you when the rest of the world is 100 shades of gray." The words were knives turning in Wolfe, tempting him unmercifully, slicing away at his self-control, making him bleed with all that could never be, an aristocratic elf and a half-breed Mustang hunter. He had known it was impossible since she was 15. And since she was 15, he had known what hell was, living with what he wanted forever just beyond his reach, forever calling to him across an abyss he must not cross, for if he did, he would destroy the very thing he wanted. He had nearly done just that, despite his best intentions. "I love you," Jessica said. "I love—" "No more," Wolfe interrupted savagely, cutting across the words that were more painful to him than any blow he had ever received. "I am tree that stands alone. You are Lady Jessica Charteris. You have nothing to fear in England any longer. I'll see that you get a suitable husband or none at all." Wolfe would have preferred none at all. The thought of another man touching Jessica added another dimension to his own personal hell. He wasn't sure he could bear it, yet he must. He took in a deep breath, let it out, and spoke more gently. "I should be hung for ever bringing you to this wilderness, but—" "No more." Jessica flinched at the raw pain in Wolfe's voice. It stopped her as nothing else could have. Fear went through her in a cold wave. She closed her eyes and turned her face against Wolfe's neck, not wanting him to see her despair. His anger she could fight, and had. His pain defeated her. When Wolfe opened the kitchen door, Willow took one look at his dark face and breathed a wordless prayer. Wolfe walked right by her as though only he and Jessica existed. "What is it? Is she hurt?" Willow asked anxiously, following. "Just exhausted." As Wolfe kicked the bedroom door shut behind him, he saw that food, brandy, and pans of warm water had been set out in the bedroom. The hearth was alive with the dance of flame. "Can you stand?" he asked quietly. Jessica nodded. Wolfe set her down near the hearth he had built for Caleb's home and began undressing her with gentle hands. Jessica neither looked up nor objected. She simply stood with a docility that made Wolfe glance sharply at her from time to time. Soon she was wearing nothing but her filmy pantalettes and camisole. They looked startlingly clean, fragile, and feminine after the condition of her outer clothing. He eased the undergarments from her body as delicately as though they were made of moonlight. Jessica shivered when the last bit of lace fell to the hearth, leaving her naked before the fire and the man she loved, the man she had hurt in ways she had never intended. Wolfe swept the fur coverlet from the bed and wrapped it around her. "Warm enough?" he asked. Without looking at him, she nodded. "Are you hungry?" She shook her head. "When did you last eat?" he asked. "I don't remember." The tone of Jessica's voice went through Wolfe like an icy wind. There was no music, no laughter, none of the mischief and warmth that had danced in her voice since he had become her lover in all ways but one. The barrier of her maidenhead still lay between them, the abyss that must not be crossed. Aristocrat and half-breed bastard. "Jessie," Wolfe whispered. But there was nothing more he could say. It had all been said. All that remained was to return her to the land and the life for which she had been born, a land and a life that were impossible for him to share. In silence, Wolfe found Jessica's hairbrush and went back to the fire where she stood. Without a word, he began combing her snarled hair. "I'm no longer so useless I can't brush my own hair." Wolfe's eyes narrowed at the loss of color and life in Jessica's voice. It was the same for her body. Like grass flattened by a storm, she was defeated. Yet, like grass, she would regain her resilience after the storm passed. He was certain of it. All she needed was rest and a return to her own place, her own people. "I like brushing your hair," Wolfe said. "It's both cool and fiery, and it smells of roses. The feel and scent of you will always haunt me." Jessica made no other objection, because to speak would have been to reveal the tears aching in her throat. Wolfe was standing very close to her, yet he was withdrawing from her with every breath, every instant, and the brush was whispering his goodbyes through her hair. Eyes closed, Jessica stood with the patience of the damned, while the man she loved tormented her with all she would never have of life and of him. If she could have died, she would have, but she couldn't. She could only endure the pain and pleasure of his touch and pray that tomorrow would never come, separating her from the only man she would ever love. When Jessica's hair swirled about her in a shining, softly curling cloud, Wolfe reluctantly put aside the brush. Air stirred by the movements of his body disturbed her hair, weaving firelight through the silky strands. Wolfe's breath came out in a soundless rush as he memorized the picture of Jessica standing in front of the fire. He wanted to see the aquamarine gems of her eyes, but they were hidden behind half-closed lids and thick eyelashes, as though she were too weary to bear even the sight of the man who had dragged her through hell. Wolfe brought the basins of warm water to the hearth. He wrung out a small, soft cloth in one of the basins, soaped it lightly, and began washing Jessica's face. The fragrance of a summer rose garden slowly expanded through the room. "I'm not so useless that I can't wash myself," she said quietly, looking at the stone hearth rather than at the man who was so gently and so completely tearing the heart from her body. "I know. You're tired. Let me take care of you as I should have from the beginning." Jessica's eyelids flinched at the brush of the cloth on her cheek. "Sore?" Wolfe whispered. She shook her head wearily. "Are you certain? Those welts look tender. How did you get them?" "I don't remember," she said tonelessly. Wolfe's fingertips caressed Jessica's cheek with great tenderness. Her breath hesitated, then frayed. When he eased the fur coverlet down to her waist, she made a tiny sound. "Don't worry, Alf. I'm not going to demand any sensual games from you. You're too tired, and I came too close to seeing you die to trust my own control tonight." Jessica's eyes widened, seeking Wolfe's for the first time. He didn't notice. He was looking at the picture she made with the silver fur wrapped around her hips and her hair a mahogany glory spilling over the creamy curves of her breasts. Slowly, Wolfe rearranged Jessica's hair until it fell down her back. Even before the washcloth touched her breasts, the nipples gathered into tight velvet crowns, contrasting starkly with the pale satin of her skin. "You're more beautiful than fire itself," Wolfe said huskily. "I'll remember you like this until I die. And I'll want you until I die." Yet Wolfe said nothing of that, for the knowledge had just come to him in another stroke of black lightning, another raw wound burning in the depths of his soul. Breath trembled out of Jessica when she saw the harsh lines of Wolfe's face. She wanted to ask what was wrong, but didn't trust herself to open her mouth without crying out her need and her love for the man who didn't love her. So she stood silently, unable to speak for the sadness locked within her throat. The fur wrap slid from Jessica's hips into Wolfe's hands, and from there to the floor. He ignored the luminous beauty of the coverlet, for the curves of Jessica's legs and the dark mahogany cloud concealing her feminine core were far more compelling to him than the rare Arctic fur. Slowly, Wolfe raised the washcloth and resumed bathing Jessica in a hushed silence. The first warm touch of water made her breath unravel in a soundless rush. When Wolfe asked wordlessly for more freedom of her body, she shifted, allowing him the intimacy. For long minutes there was only the liquid dance of water, the whispering of flame, and the glide of cloth over skin. Finally, reluctantly, Wolfe rinsed away the last bit of soap, leaving behind the mingled fragrance of rose and warm woman. "All done," he said huskily. He stood up in a rush and closed his eyes, unable to look at Jessica any longer without touching her in a way that had nothing to do with unspoken apologies and everything to do with the hunger whose fiery claws had long since raked him into readiness for the coupling that must never occur. Jessica saw Wolfe's need and felt her own, both physical hunger and something far more complex. Without a word, she began unbuttoning Wolfe's shirt. His eyes snapped open. "What are you doing?" he asked roughly. "Undressing you." "I can see that." "Then you'll be able to see me bathing you as gently as you bathed me." "No." "Why not?" "You're too tired." Jessica's elegant fingers didn't so much as pause in their work. "I'm no more tired than you." "Jessie." Her eyes met his. For a moment he didn't know if he could bear what he saw in their clear, light blue depths. "You have done as Lady Victoria asked," Jessica said quietly. "You have taught me not to fear your touch. Now you are exiling me from your life. Will you deny me this night, too?" Wolfe knew he should do just that, but he couldn't force the words past his lips. Jessica finally had accepted the end that he had always known must come. She would fight the annulment no longer. He hadn't expected victory to be so painful. "You are exiling me from your life." Silently, Wolfe removed his boots and socks, then closed his eyes and stood motionless while Jessica undressed him. With a distant sense of surprise, he realized that he had never given himself to a woman in this way, trusting her enough to surrender sensual control to her hands. The feel of Jessica removing his shirt was exquisite. The tug and release of his belt, followed by the slow, inevitable slide of his remaining clothes down his body, was extraordinary, like being naked for the first time. With a feeling of unreality, he stepped out of his clothes and brushed them aside with his foot. The first touch of the warm washcloth against Wolfe's face made his eyelids flinch. "Sore?" she asked softly, echoing Wolfe's earlier question. "You flinched the same way when I first touched you with the washcloth. Were you sore?" "No. I wanted you so much that even the lightest touch was almost more than I could bear." "Yes," Wolfe said simply, opening his eyes, hiding from Jessica no longer. He felt her breath as a warm rush over his chest when she looked into his eyes. "In this, at least, we are well matched," Jessica whispered. Wolfe didn't answer. He couldn't. The feel of warm water against the pulse on his neck had taken his breath. The sound of the cloth being rinsed was a quicksilver music in the silence. The fragrance of a rose's softly opening petals filled his senses. The slight roughness of the washcloth brought his body to excruciating fullness. He closed his eyes once more, absorbing Jessica's presence into his very pores, while the cloth moved slowly over his arms and shoulders, washing away fatigue with slow sweeps of warmth, dissolving everything but the certainty of Jessica's touch, her soft breathing, her scent wrapping him in a sensuality he had never known before. For an immeasurable time, he lived suspended between firelight and an elf whose touch created a new, magical world. Water made gentle silver sounds as first the cloth and then his skin was rinsed. He sensed Jessica kneeling before him. When the cloth returned, it was to wash him without hesitation or inhibition. He couldn't hide, for wherever she touched him, she would discover his passion. But Wolfe no longer cared about hiding, for he knew Jessica burned for him in the same way. She was touching him as if he were a dream condensing out of firelight, cherishing him in a hushed silence that was itself another kind of caress. The washcloth slipped from her fingers and fell forgotten onto the hearth. The feel of her hands on his thighs was both relief and another turn of passion's rack. The glide of her palms over him was a pleasure so great it was pain. The gentle rush of her breath over his heavy arousal was heaven and hell in one. Wolfe couldn't prevent the low sound he made when Jessica's hand cupped him, nor could he prevent the single silver drop that condensed, speaking so deeply of the need within him. When she kissed away the evidence of his need, she brought him to his knees. "You're burning me alive," Wolfe said hoarsely. "No more than you're burning me," she whispered, pulling Wolfe's hands down her body. "Touch me. Know how much I want you." It was like sliding into fire. There was no withdrawal, no coy retreat, nothing but the sultry rose opening at his first touch, weeping for him and yielding to him at the same instant. She clung to him, watching him, seeing the shivering rush of her own passion in the expanding center of his eyes, feeling it in the silky heat gilding his hand. Then Jessica could support her own weight no longer. With a husky moan, she sank down onto the fur, drawing Wolfe with her, keeping his hand pressed deeply to her. "You have taught me so much about a man's body," Jessica whispered. "I never would have guessed." Her voice frayed into another husky cry as Wolfe's hand cupped her and stole into her in the same sweet motion. Unable to help her response, she moved her hips in slow counterpoint to his motions, deepening his presence within her body. Wolfe closed his eyes and tested the heart of the flower that had been given to him. He found only clinging ease and secret reign shielded by a maidenhood as fragile as flame. She wanted him as he had never been wanted by anyone, and she was telling him with each sultry drop, calling to him in a silence that was infused with hunger and the scent of roses. "What would you never have guessed?" Wolfe asked when he could trust himself to speak. "That you were made of honey and fire." "It's you, not me. Honey and fire." Wolfe breathed Jessica's name and withdrew from the satin sheath of her body, heard her cry out at the loss of him. For 2 seconds he endured it, for 3 seconds. Then he could take no more of their shared pain. He slid within her again and felt the sweet agony of her response all the way to his soul. "Hold me," Jessica whispered. "I need to feel you pressed against me. Please, Wolfe, I need you." "I shouldn't." "Why?" "You're too dangerous when you burn. You make me forget everything." Yet even as Wolfe was speaking, he was moving over Jessica, crushing her gently into the fur. The feel of her along his naked body went through him in a soundless explosion of heat. When she shifted to draw him even closer, he pinned her hips with his own. "Lie still," Wolfe breathed against Jessica's mouth. "You'll make me lose control. I don't want that yet." "What do you want?" "Your kiss. It's yours, Wolfe. Only yours." He took what she gave, giving himself in return. It was like no other kiss he had known. He felt her as though he was in her skin, burning, and she was in his, on fire. Slowly his body moved against hers, pleasuring both of them in the same gliding motions. She answered instinctively, opening herself, seeking him blindly, needing him until she wept. Yet no matter how she struggled, he withheld himself. "Wolfe," Jessica said, her voice strained. "Don't you want me? You've taught me so much about your body and my own. Teach me about the shared body of love." "No, Elf." "Is coupling that painful? Is that what you don't want me to know? Is that what you're sending me back to England to face alone, knowing that someday your elf will lie screaming and bleeding beneath a rotting man?" Wolfe shuddered with a combination of rage at the thought of Jessica lying beneath another man, and desire because she was lying beneath him now with her legs open and her hungry softness pressing against him, licking over him with honey and fire. "Jessie, no," he groaned. "It must not be." But whether he meant her coupling with another man in the future or having Wolfe buried within her now, even Wolfe couldn't say. "Then I'm right," Jessica accused wildly. "I will be ripped apart. You have seduced me with everything but the truth." "Taking a man within your body won't hurt you." "I don't believe you," she raged. "I've seen a man aroused. I've felt myself tight around no more than your finger. You are lying to me." Jessica's body twisted beneath Wolfe, inciting him beyond bearing. Even as he told himself to roll aside, he caught her mouth beneath his and sank down over her body, absorbing her struggles with his much greater strength. His tongue thrust heavily into her mouth and filled it as he longed to fill her body. His hips moved, dragging his hardened flesh over the softness he had called from her. Heat pulsed through Jessica and spilled over to Wolfe, increasing the stunning sensitivity of flesh sliding across flesh. He made a throttled sound as every muscle in his body clenched with passion and a need that was destroying him. With a low moan, Jessica arched against him, for she needed the heaviness of his body more than she needed air. "Hold still," Wolfe said in a hoarse voice. "Don't move unless I tell you. Do you hear me, Jessie? I'm going to show you how little you have to fear from a man, but you must lie still." She shuddered and became motionless. Wolfe took a breath and then another, trying to get a grip on the wild, seething violence of his need for her. It was impossible. Control kept sliding away by hot increments, leaving no reality but that of the girl who lay ready beneath him, watching him with eyes that were black with passion. "Wrap your legs around my hips. Slowly, Jessie. Very slowly." Watching him, she shifted in slow motion until her legs circled his hips. "Like this," Jessie whispered. Wolfe locked his jaw as he brushed against the sultry woman heat that lay open to him. A long shudder racked his restraint, threatening to tear it apart. He took several careful breaths. "Yes, like that." His voice was low, almost a groan. "Just like that. Don't move, Jessie. Not one bit. I'm going to show you how easily you'll accept a man." "Now?" "Now. Just for a moment. Just a little bit. Just so you won't be afraid. I won't take your maidenhead, but you must lie very, very still." Jessica's eyes widened as Wolfe's fingers caressed her, parted her very gently, eased into her so slowly that she couldn't believe it was happening at all. And then she realized it wasn't his fingers pressing into her. "Dear God," Jessica whispered. "Yes, dear God." Another shudder racked Wolfe as he eased a bit farther into the petal softness of Jessica's body. He watched the center of her eyes expand into glittering blackness, tasted the unraveling of her breath against his lips, felt her hot, supple yielding to him, heard the small sound she made at the back of her throat as her nails scored sweetly on his arms. "Am I hurting you?" he breathed. The whimper that came from Jessica's throat as her eyes closed wasn't an answer, but the secret rain of her response was. It took his breath away. "Jessie, my sweet elf." Shaking, Wolfe threaded his fingers through her unbound hair until his hands were wholly tangled within the long strands. He wanted nothing more on earth than to flex his hips and bury himself in her sleek, yielding warmth. What was making sweat break all over his body was the knowledge that Jessica wanted it as violently as he did. "Look at me," Wolfe said heavily. "I want to see you while we're joined even in this small way. Christ knows it's not enough, not nearly enough, but it's all that can be. Look at me, Jessie. Let me see the passion in you." Slowly, Jessica's eyes opened. She looked at the hard lines of Wolfe's face, at his body drawn with restraint and glistening with sweat. His eyes were dilated with the same passion that was sending tongues of fire licking up from between her thighs. Then he moved slightly, retreating and returning with exquisite care. A burst of fire drenched Jessica in golden heat. Wolfe felt it, shared it, and moved again, caressing her with his whole body. She gasped and tightened her legs around his hips, instinctively trying to deepen the tantalizing union. Wolfe's fists clenched in Jessica's long hair as he felt his self-control dissolving in the hot, secret rain of her body. He knew he should withdraw completely from her heat, but he couldn't force himself to. She was everything he had ever wanted, and he had wanted her much too long. Telling himself it would be the last time, he moved again, tormenting both of them with the incomplete union. "Does this hurt you?" he asked through his teeth. Jessica shook her head even as she wondered at the harshness in his voice. Heat shimmered through her, making her gasp. Breath hissed out of Wolfe as he felt passion ripple through Jessica to his own flesh just within her. Sweat gathered and ran down his spine. He knew he must draw back before the sweet violence overcame what was left of his restraint. "You have nothing to fear from a man inside your body," Wolfe said through clenched teeth. His own need knotted and twisted within him, wrenching him until he wanted to cry out with anguish, "Do you hear me, Elf? You have nothing to fear." Jessica's breath unraveled. Her hips moved rhythmically as pleasure peaked and ebbed and peaked once more. "Stop," Wolfe said. Tremors jerked through him at each melting of her body around him. "Jessie, stop!" "I'm sorry. I can't. Wolfe!" He saw her teeth sink into her lower lip as she fought the fulfillment that was taking her. He brushed his open mouth over hers as he moved very slowly within her. "Never mind, Elf," he breathed into her mouth. "It's all right. Don't fight it. Let me feel your pleasure." Wolfe's hand moved between their bodies, capturing the silky bud. He felt the splintering, shivering heat that washed through Jessica to him. The abandon of her response took him to the breaking edge of his control, and he hung there, shaking, while she clung hotly to him, silently begging for more of him with each sultry pulse of her pleasure. "There's such fire in you," Wolfe whispered. "You're killing me, Jessie. You could take every bit of me without pain, and you must know it as well as I." Heavy-lidded eyes opened and watched Wolfe as he teased the sensitive flower that had opened for him. Passion burned as deeply in her glance as it did in her body. "All I know is that you are not the same as other men," Jessica said. "In this," he moved his hips, "I am no different." "Dear God," she whispered. "Again." "What?" "Do that again, please, Wolfe. Again." With a whispered curse that was also a prayer for strength, Wolfe moved within Jessica once more and at the same time caressed her with his fingers. She made a low sound as a network of sensation raced through her, leaving ecstasy shimmering in its wake. She gave herself to the tender ravishment and to the man who had called passion from her depths. With each sensual peak shivering through her, she kissed him, whispering to him, telling him the only truth that mattered. "You are my Lord Wolfe." Her words became part of the blood hammering through Wolfe's veins. Feeling and hearing the silky climax unravel Jessica was burning him so softly, so completely, that he didn't know he was wholly afire. A shudder went through him at each touch of her mouth, but her words were even more seductive, telling him what he had always known and never wanted to face. "I will take no other man into my body." Jessica's hands slid down Wolfe's hot back to the rigid muscles of his hips, seeking his very different flesh, finding it. With exquisite care, she drew her nails over him. "Make me yours, Wolfe. Only yours." Jessica's name was an anguished cry against her throat as Wolfe's control broke. He drove completely into her, changing her body in a sweeping, irrevocable instant. Her breath tore as she was filled to overflowing. He was so deeply inside her that she felt the pulses of his release as clearly as she felt her own heartbeat. She put her arms around his shaking body and held him, kissing his eyes and cheeks and the corners of his mouth until he had the breath to speak once more. "Now you are mine, Jessie. Only mine." As Wolfe lowered his mouth to hers, he whispered, "May God have mercy on my soul." "Wolfe?" Her arms tightened around him. "What's wrong?" "It doesn't matter anymore. I've burned for you so long that hell has nothing new to teach me. But I have new things to teach you, Jessie. Heaven and hell combined." Before Jessica could say anything more, Wolfe sealed her lips with a kiss that claimed her mouth as completely as he had claimed her body. Then his hips moved powerfully, and she forgot everything but his heavy presence within her. Pleasure coursed through Jessica with each thrusting motion Wolfe made. Her body tightened and tightened until she couldn't breathe, yet still Wolfe moved in sensual rhythms over her, against her, within her, setting fire to every bit of her, burning her alive. She tried to speak but could think of no words, much less shape her tongue to form them. All she could say was his name, and she said it again and again as he ripped the world away, leaving her nothing to hang on to but him. Forerunners of savage ecstasy clawed through Jessica, drawing her body into a shivering arch. She gasped at the unexpected sensations. They were more acute than anything she had ever known, almost frightening in their intensity. "Wolfe!" "You're feeling it now, aren't you?" Wolfe's voice was as dark as his eyes, watching her. "You wanted this, Jessie. You've wanted it since you were 15. And since you were 15, I've wanted to give it to you." Jessica gasped, and her eyes widened with surprise as sensual lightning transfixed her, arching her into Wolfe's driving body. He laughed and bit her neck hard enough to leave passionate marks. "Heaven and hell combined, Jessie. I'm going to burn you all the way to your soul." The restrained savagery of Wolfe's teeth against her hot skin dragged a moan from Jessica. When she made a sharp rising sound, he sealed her mouth with his own. He took her cries into himself and dragged more of them from her, wanting all that she had to give. Nails scored Wolfe's skin, drawing a primitive sound of need from him. The small pain simply served to focus the seething violence of pleasure. When he shifted his mouth to the pulse beating wildly in Jessica's neck, she responded to the barely veiled savagery of the caress by arching like a drawn bow. Wolfe held her there, stretched and quivering on a rack of pleasure, and then he began moving again, driving her higher and higher with each powerful motion of his body. Her breath became as broken as his, her skin as hot, as slick, until she was wild with need for the consummation that he kept just beyond her reach. "I can't bear it," Jessica said raggedly, dragging her teeth across Wolfe's chest in sensual punishment, twisting beneath him, seeking relief. Wolfe laughed and bit her shoulder as he pinned her with his hips. "I've burned like this for 5 years. Surely you can stand 5 minutes." When Jessica's hand slid down Wolfe's body, he shuddered, caught her wrists, and held them in one hand above her head. "None of your sweet tricks, Elf." "You are torturing me." "I'm torturing me. I'm teaching you. Wrap those beautiful legs around my waist. Yes, like that. Now lift your hips." Wolfe whispered against Jessica's mouth, biting her between each word. "And you will find what you've been seeking so hotly." Jessica lifted toward him as he drove into her. The ecstasy was so intense she would have screamed if she could have, but Wolfe had taken her breath even as he had claimed her mouth. He slid his arm beneath her hips, dragging her so tightly against his body that he could feel her very bones. Then he thrust into her hard and deep, wanting to find the point beyond which she would refuse him. What he found was more sleek yielding to him, heat surrounding him, burning him, heaven and hell combined as he hurtled headlong with her into the sun. Later, much later, Wolfe held Jessica while she slept, and he counted the cost of what he had done. Chapter 18. When Jessica awoke the next morning, Wolfe was standing by the window, as naked and magnificent as the mountains rising to meet the dawn. He was looking out over the rugged land with an expression of loss and yearning that made her heart turn over. She wondered what he was seeing in the wild sunrise, and why it made him so sad. "Wolfe?" As he walked toward Jessica, his expression changed. The gentle smile he gave her made tears burn behind her eyelids. Indigo eyes swept over her, lingering on the banked fire twisting through her hair and the crystalline perfection of her light eyes. Long, lean fingers traced her eyebrows, her cheekbones, the curves of her mouth. He sat on the bed beside her and kissed her tenderly. "Good morning, Mrs. Lonetree." Wolfe hadn't called her that before. The words pierced Jessica as deeply as the sorrow beneath her husband's smile. Trembling, she smiled up at him in return, and then her heart caught and her smile threatened to turn upside down. She had never seen anything as poignant as Wolfe's haunted eyes and tender smile. "Did I remember to tell you last night how beautiful you are?" Wolfe asked. "You made me feel beautiful." "You are." His eyes closed for an instant as though in pain. "And so fragile." "What's wrong?" she whispered. "Nothing. Save this, and this, and this." As Wolfe touched each small mark he had left on Jessica's skin, he pulled down the bed covers. The silence became thick with emotions and unspoken words. "I'll be more careful of you next time, Elf." He looked into her clear, pale blue eyes. "If you want a next time." Jessica caught one of Wolfe's hands between hers, kissed his palm, and pressed it to her cheek. "I loved joining with you," she said in a low voice. "I want there to be times without number." Black eyelashes swept down, concealing the haunted indigo depths of Wolfe's eyes. "I'll try not to get you pregnant, but You burn through my control. Don't you want a child? I've caused you enough fear and hurt. I won't tear you apart bearing children who have neither titles nor estates to inherit. Wolfe, she said brokenly, I want your children. Hush, Elf, he murmured, touching her lips with his thumb. It's not necessary. I won't cry annulment for lack of heirs. You're safe with me. You'll never have to fear for your life again. Jessica's hands tightened on Wolfe's. The grief in him was as real and yet as impossible to touch as night itself. It tore at her in ways she couldn't name. I love you, my Lord Wolfe, she said, lifting up to his lips. I've always loved you. I always will. Yes, I've always known that. Jessica waited, but Wolfe said no more. Pain twisted through her as she finally understood the source of Wolfe's unhappiness. Tree that stands alone. You don't love me, she whispered, realizing too late what she had done to the man she loved. I want you, Jessie. I've always wanted you. I always will. Wolfe fitted his mouth to Jessica's with exquisite care before he took her with a single slow penetration of his tongue. The kiss deepened and changed until she was breathing quickly and moving hungrily against him. Wolfe, she said raggedly. Lie with me, Jessie. Let me worship your body with mine. Jessica couldn't withhold herself from the naked hunger in Wolfe's eyes and in his body. She let him come to her, let him take her in burning silence, let him unravel her so gently that she never knew she was undone until the world turned to gold around her and she wept Wolfe's name and her love against his chest. Then he held her, letting her tears scald him in the long minutes before she took a shuddering breath and lay quietly once more. Slowly, Wolfe eased from the bed and pulled on his clothes. The bedroom door opened and closed soundlessly behind him. Moments later, Jessica's eyes opened bright with tears. Impatiently, she wiped them away and reached for her clothes. Wolfe found Reno in the kitchen. The empty mugs and plates on the table showed that Caleb and Rafe had already eaten and gone out to work. From the other bedroom came the sound of Willow singing softly to her baby as she nursed him. The gentle music burned Wolfe like acid, reminding him of what he had done to the delicate girl who had always trusted him to protect her. But he had taken her instead. "Is Jessie all right?" Reno asked. Wolfe gave him a slicing sideways glance, wondering if the other man had somehow guessed that Jessica had finally become a wife in fact, as well as in name. "She's fine," Wolfe said curtly. "I told her to sleep late. Why?" "Willow said she looked real ragged last night." "So did I." "That's the God's truth," Reno said. 3 days of a hell wind like that would take the starch out of the devil himself. Reno smiled and resettled his hat on hair that was thick, black, and shiny. The light green of his eyes was like cut crystal. Looking at him, Wolfe wondered how Jessica had avoided succumbing to Reno Moran's dark charm and physical grace, or to Rafe, who had the smile of a fallen angel and eyes that had seen hell. Wolfe couldn't help thinking that either Moran would have been better for Jessica than a half-breed who had nothing to speak of but an uncanny skill with mustangs and long guns. Yet Wolfe knew he would have killed anyone who tried to take away the beautiful, sensual elf who came to him so perfectly, exploring the shimmering reaches of passion with him as no other woman had. "That's a brave girl you have," Reno said. Not many women would have gone out in that storm for love or money, much less for a mean steel-dust Mustang that most men would shoot on sight. Wolfe's eyes narrowed against the darkness and pain streaking through him. My fault. Jessie was trying to prove I shouldn't send her back to England. Reno gave Wolfe a questioning look. Jessie told me how you stood over more than one foal, holding off wolves with your 6-gun, Wolfe said, changing the subject as he poured a mug of coffee. I owe you. Like hell you do. If it hadn't been for your skill with a rifle, Jed Slater would have killed Willow, Caleb, and me. You get the pick of my foals, Wolfe said, as though Reno hadn't spoken. Lonetree, sometimes you can be a bullheaded son of a bitch. Thank you. Reno shot him a disbelieving look, then laughed out loud. Wolfe smiled, but it faded quickly. The shadow of a bird flying beyond the window caught his eye. For long, aching moments he looked past the grass and trees to the unbridled glory of the San Juans. He hadn't truly known how much a part of his soul the mountains were until he looked at them and knew he must leave their wildness behind. The pain of it drew deep brackets around his mouth, but it had to be done. Remember that blue roan you fancied? Wolfe asked quietly. The wild one you caught a few summers back? Wolfe nodded. I remember. Hell of a good desert horse. Best I've ever seen. She's yours. Now look here, Reno began. You'll earn her, Wolfe said, cutting across Reno's objections. It will cost you most of a summer of gold hunting. Reno's eyes narrowed as he measured the man sitting across from him. I want you to ride with Jessie and me as far as the Mississippi, Wolfe continued. Between the Indians, the gold hunters, and the dregs of the soldiers on both sides of the war, he shrugged. It gets real lively, Reno agreed. If it were just me, it wouldn't matter. But Jessie will be along. I'd feel better knowing you were at my back. Reno's expression became intent as he sensed the turmoil behind Wolfe's calm words. I'd gladly ride to hell with you, Reno said calmly, and you know it. I'm not going to hell. Not quite. Wolfe's smile thinned. England? Guessed Reno. It's Jessie's home. You'll have a hard time hunting mustangs for a living in England. Lord Stewart has wanted me to work for him for years. He'll get his wish. Reno said something under his breath in Spanish about Wolfe having the heart of an ox and the brains. Gracias, Wolfe said sardonically. There was silence, followed by the sound of Reno's work gloves snapping against his palm. When do you want to leave? Reno asked finally. Soon. Jessie isn't cut out for the West. I haven't heard Red complain. Have you? The question was ignored by Wolfe. After a moment, Reno stood with the lazy grace that had fooled more than one man into thinking he was slow. Amigo, I think you're making a mistake. No, I'm merely paying for one. What mistake is that? Jessica asked from the doorway. He's got some damn fool idea about, Reno began, then broke off abruptly. The look Wolfe was giving him would have frozen lightning. Cursing under his breath, Reno snapped his gloves against his hand again and went out the back door without another word. Jessica looked at Wolfe curiously. I'm giving Reno the pick of the foals, Wolfe said. That's hardly a mistake. He earned it. Without him, we would have lost more than one foal. That's what I told him. As though pulled against his will, Wolfe turned again and stared out the window. Jessica saw deep emotion kindle in Wolfe's eyes, then fade into the haunted shadows she had first noticed that morning when he watched the sunrise. She went and stood beside him. She saw nothing beyond the window but the beauty of the vast land. "Wolfe, is something wrong?" He turned and looked at her with haunted eyes. "Wolfe," she whispered, reaching toward him. "Kiss me, Jessie," he said, bending down to her. "Kiss me hard and deep. When you kiss me, I don't think about what must be." With a small sound, she went up on tiptoe, even as he lifted her in his arms, letting the wildness inside him focus in the passion only Jessica had ever been able to summon from the depths of his soul. "Does this mean you've forgiven Jessie for going out in the blizzard?" Willow asked from the doorway. Reluctantly, Wolfe ended the kiss and tucked Jessica's scarlet face against his neck. He smiled at Willow, despite the bittersweet combination of sadness and desire twisting through him. "We're negotiating," Wolfe said. "Her surrender or yours?" retorted Willow. "Mine, of course. Elves are too fragile. They either win or die." "In that case," Willow said dryly, "I'll get Ethan's bathwater and leave you to your, negotiations." As Wolfe lowered Jessica's feet to the floor, a cool premonition slid down her spine, the echo of Wolfe's words. Elves are too fragile. They either win or die. Jessica said nothing until Willow went out of the kitchen carrying a pan of warm water in her hands. When Jessica turned to Wolfe, he was staring out the window once more. The expression of sorrow in his eyes made fear squeeze her heart. "Love, what's wrong?" she asked. "Nothing." She shook her head slowly. "Your eyes are haunted." "'Tis your imagination." Wolfe smiled and touched her cheek gently. "Elves are noted for their imagination." "Wolfe," she whispered, "I can't joke about what I see in your eyes. Who or what are you mourning?" His eyes narrowed in surprise. He hadn't expected Jessica to see into him so clearly, even more clearly than he saw into himself. Mourning. "I'm always sad to say goodbye to Caleb and Willow," Wolfe said after a moment, the only part of the truth he would discuss. It was Jessica's turn to be surprised. "We're leaving?" "It's too wild here." Wolfe's voice was resonant with finality and grief. A chill roughened Jessica's skin. "What are you saying?" she whispered. "We're going to England." "I'd rather hunt mustangs," she said. "Or did you want to wait until autumn when this year's crop of foals will be weaned?" Wolfe turned away without answering. "Wolfe?" "We'll be in England when the foals are weaned." "Then we'll come back next spring." "No." The word was soft, final. "Why not?" "Spring and fall are when Lord Robert's managers are most needed on his country estates." The chill moving through Jessica congealed into ice and settled into the pit of her stomach. "What does that have to do with us?" she asked tightly. "I will be one of those managers." "What are you saying?" Wolfe looked out the window. "We will live in England." "You hate England." Wolfe shrugged. "Parts of the countryside are quite pretty." "They're not a patch on this," she said, indicating the wild beauty of the mountains beyond the window. "No, they're not." "What of your mustangs?" "I'm giving them to Caleb." Jessica swayed and whispered, "You mean never to come back to the West?" Wolfe didn't answer. He didn't have to. The shadows in his eyes said all that was necessary. But why? You love this land. I've seen you, Wolfe. You watch these mountains the way a man watches a woman he loves. Let it go, Jessie. No, why can't we live here? Why must we live in England? This is no place for you, Wolfe said quietly. You have to be born for this land. You weren't. And you were. He made an odd, almost helpless gesture. Yes, but I can survive in England. You can't survive the West. Dear God, how you must hate me. Swiftly, Wolfe turned and touched Jessica's cheek. I don't hate you, Alf. You will. I've cost you the only thing you've ever truly loved. You will hate me as surely and as deeply as you love the land. Wolfe saw the shine of tears on Jessica's face and gathered her into his arms. Hush, wife. You're only hurting yourself. I don't want to live in England, she said flatly, pushing away from him. Do you hear me? I love the mountains. Why can't we live here? You gave yourself into my care. I won't watch this wild land kill you. Jessica's hands clenched against Wolfe's shirt, digging into the hard muscle beneath the cloth. Wolfe, listen to me. I am stronger than you believe. If I were the weak little elf you think me, I would have died as a child. His hand curled beneath her chin. Silently, he felt the delicate bone structure and soft skin. He smiled sadly. You haven't half my strength, Wolfe said. In England, that won't matter. In England, no one looks beyond your bastardy and Indian blood, she said harshly. Here you have friends and a chance to build a better life for yourself. Can't you see that? Can't you see what... Wolfe's thumb pressed against Jessica's lips, sealing in her urgent words. I've always seen that, he said in a calm voice. It's why I left England, and you. I could have you, or I could have the West. I took you, knowing what the end would be. England. But It's done, Jessie, he interrupted flatly. It was done when I took your maidenhead. Wolfe, please believe me. I didn't mean for this to happen. Not like this. Dear God, not like this. Gently, Wolfe took Jessica's clenched hands from his shirt. I know. But all your pleas and tears won't change what is. You are what you are. I am what I am. We are husband and wife, and England will be our home. Jessica closed her eyes. She would have preferred blows to Wolfe's calm summation of their marriage. Go begin packing, Wolfe said quietly. I'll help Caleb for the time that is left. The kitchen door opened and closed softly behind Wolfe. For a long time, Jessica stared blindly at the door, seeing nothing but the tears overflowing her eyes, understanding too late what Wolfe had always known. Their marriage would destroy one of them, if not both. Agree to an annulment. Damn you, let me go. I'm the wrong husband for you. You're the wrong wife for me. Lying together would be the worst mistake of my life. You were not born for the western wilderness. I was. Don't love me, Jessie. It will only hurt us both. It's done, Jessie. It was done when I took your maidenhead. You are what you are. I am what I am. Tree that stands alone. Jessica opened her eyes and wrapped her arms around herself, trying to stave off the ice radiating through her soul. With the same fierce determination she once had used to survive as a child, she searched now for a way out of the trap she had sprung around Wolfe. When she finally found it, She washed the marks of grief from her face and went to find Caleb Black. "Delaying won't accomplish anything," Wolfe said, continuing the argument that had begun the moment Jessica had awakened him at dawn. "Whether we leave today or 10 days after, we're still leaving." "I said I would return to England without a fuss if you would hunt mustangs for one last time," Jessica said evenly. "I meant it." Warily, Wolfe looked at Jessica. He had seen her in many moods, from intense fear to intense passion, but never had he seen her like this. There was nothing fey or elfin about her now, nor anything fragile. There was simply an ingathering of strength and purpose that reminded him of nothing so much as himself. "I don't want to hunt mustangs," Wolfe said carefully. "Then do it for Caleb. He needs more horses in order to work his ranch properly. He said so himself." Wolfe looked uneasily at Jessica. He sensed the wild grief in her as clearly as she had sensed it in him that morning. Yet there were no tears in her eyes, no resonances of passion in her voice. He didn't know her this way. The realization frightened him. Wolfe's hands flashed out, pulling Jessica into his arms. "I won't take you into the wild with me," he said harshly. "I know." "Is that why you're so eager for me to hunt mustangs? Are you already tired of having me in your bed and body?" The words were hardly out of Wolfe's mouth before Jessica was kissing him as though she expected to die in the next moment and wanted him never to forget what she had been like when fully alive. He kissed her in the same way until they both were breathing brokenly, consumed by passion. "Fill me," Jessica whispered against his mouth. "Fill me until I can't remember what it is to be separate from you. Fill me as though it were the last time." With a hoarse sound, Wolfe swept the filmy layers of Jessica's nightgown above her waist. He whispered her name as he knelt between her legs and drew them up over his thighs. The melting ease of his penetration told him more about her love than any words could have. The sweetness of being possessed by him and possessing him in turn dragged a husky sound from the back of her throat. "More," Jessica said urgently. "Wolfe, I must have more of you." "You're too small. I'll hurt you." "Please." She pulled at him, straining against him, asking for more of him, asking for all that he had to give, her words a dark fire licking over him, making him shudder with a need unlike any he had known before. With a hoarse sound, he slid his arms beneath her knees and lifted her legs, opening her without reservation. She moaned and bit her lip and arched against him, asking for more. Her silken heat spilled over him, underlining her whispered pleas. "To think I called you a nun," Wolfe said hoarsely. "You are fire, elf. Burn for me." Then he gave her what she was crying for, filling her, sinking into her so deeply that she felt him all through her body until she was stretched on a golden rack of ecstasy, and she burned. Wolfe felt Jessica's wild release begin and laughed with elemental triumph. He moved slowly, deeply, dragging cries from her, watching her burn, burning with her as the silky fire of her ecstasy fused their bodies together. He drove repeatedly into her, sinking more deeply into her fire, wanting it never to end. But she felt too good. She lured him too profoundly. Her words and rippling cries and sleek body demanded that he give himself to her as completely as she had given herself to him. Even as Wolfe tried to hold back, he knew it was too late. He was too much a part of her, his body so deeply joined with hers that he didn't know where he ended and she began, two flames intertwined, burning redoubled with each breath. Fighting no more, he gave himself to her and to the ecstasy that burned ever higher, feeding on his release, renewing and consuming both of them until they burned as a single flame, inseparable. Caleb was waiting for Jessica in the kitchen. He looked at her pale, drawn face and bleak eyes and said something savage beneath his breath. "You really mean to go through with this damn fool idea?" he demanded. "Yes." "Did you tell Wolfe?" "That wasn't part of our bargain. I agreed not to set out alone if you would agree not to tell Wolfe that I was going." Caleb took off his hat, ran long fingers through his black hair, and said bluntly, "I think this is a piss-poor idea." "I'm aware of that," Jessica said in a clipped voice. "I'm also aware that Wolfe would probably kill Reno or Rafe if they helped me. Wolfe won't kill you." "You're a lot more certain of that than I am," Caleb retorted. "Wolfe will be angry, but he knows there's no other woman for you except Willow. Reno or Rafe wouldn't touch me either, but I'm afraid to test Wolfe's temper that far. He might shoot before he asked questions. He's frighteningly good with that rifle." "Seems like a man as possessive as Wolfe is just might love his wife." "Desire isn't love," Jessica said tightly. "Jessie," Caleb began, only to be interrupted. "I trapped Tree that stands alone into marriage. I'm setting him free." "Jessie." "Are the horses ready?" she asked, cutting across his attempts to speak. There was a taut silence. "I'm damn tempted to ride out after Wolfe," Caleb said finally. "I can't stop you." "And I can't stop you either, is that it? You'll cut and run off in the wild the first chance you get, and the devil take the hindmost." "Of course. That's the only reason you agreed to take me to the stage in the first place." "Blackmail." "In a word, yes." Caleb's mouth turned down as he looked at the darkness and determination in Jessica's eyes. It reminded him of the time Willow had set out alone on Ishmael in the middle of the night, rather than go through with a marriage she believed Caleb didn't want. Willow had come very close to dying because of her determination that Caleb be set free. The memory of nearly losing her still haunted him at odd moments, making him go to Willow and hold her, reassuring himself that she was alive, safe, his. Jessica was no less determined to do what she believed was right than Willow had been. All Caleb could do was see that Jessica stayed safe until Wolfe had a chance to sort out the mess. Grimly, Caleb pulled out his 6-gun, spun the cylinder to check the load, and holstered the gun with a smoothness that told its own deadly story. "The horses are waiting, Mrs. Lonetree." Tears came unbidden to her eyes. "My name is Lady Jessica Charteris." "Call it," Reno said. "Heads," said Rafe. "Tails." Rafe flipped the coin. Reno's hand flashed out, caught the coin, and smacked it down on the back of his hand. He pocketed the coin without bothering to look at it. "Tails," Reno said, turning away. As he reached for his horse's rein, the bullwhip Rafe was holding rippled and writhed as though alive. Suddenly, the tip cracked with the sound of a pistol shot. Reno turned toward Rafe, who was coiling the whip with swift motions of his hands. "That's your free one, Matt," Rafe said flatly. "Don't do it again. Which horses do you want?" "Only one of us is going. Me. You're staying with Willow." Rafe smiled thinly. "I figured that out real quick. What you haven't figured out is Wolfe was so eager to get finished hunting mustangs and get back to his wife that he left here at a dead run." Reno hesitated, listening. "By the time you catch up and the two of you get back to the ranch," Rafe continued, "Caleb will have a hell of a long lead on you. So which of Caleb's horses are best for making up time over rough country?" Willow said to be sure one of the horses we had waiting for Wolfe was Ishmael. All right. Who else? Reno's smile was as hard and brilliant as his eyes. Doesn't matter. Everything Caleb left here is better than anything he took with him. That boy was in no hurry to put daylight between himself and Wolfe. Rafe blinked and then laughed softly. Tricky. Smart. Wolfe is going to come down off the mountain like a blue norther. Maybe. And maybe he'll just let Jessie go. From what I've seen, he wasn't any too pleased to be married to her. Pale green eyes assessed Rafe before Reno showed his teeth in a wolfish smile. And that's just what you were planning to rub Wolfe's face in, wasn't it? Rafe's smile was as cold as his gray eyes. That's a fact. He was hard on her. He had some cause, and Jessie was the first one to say so. All the same, I'd like to be the one to tell Wolfe. Sorry, big brother, this one is mine. Reno swung into the saddle and looked down at Rafe. Think, why do you suppose Jessica asked Caleb to go instead of one of us? I've been wondering about that, Rafe admitted. What with a wife and new baby to look after and all. Stop wondering. Caleb is married to the soles of his feet and Wolfe knows it. So does Jessie. Neither one of us would have touched Jessie, Rafe said instantly. She knows that. Uh-huh. Now, do you want to be the one to explain it all to Wolfe while he's a half-mile away taking your measure over the barrel of a rifle? If Jessie didn't love that hard-headed son of a bitch, I'd be glad to explain it to Wolfe any way I got the chance. So would I, Reno said flatly. But she does love him. Rafe's mouth tightened. He nodded and stepped out of the way. All right, Blackfoot, Reno said. Let's see if you're half the running fool Jed Slater thought you were. The tall black horse leaped forward, hitting its full stride in seconds. The second day on the trail, Caleb spent as much time looking over his shoulder as he did watching the route ahead. Stop putting a kink in your neck, Jessica said, looking up from the stream where the horses were drinking. Wolfe isn't coming after me. For a bright girl, you can be stump dumb at times. Caleb checked the cinch on the pack saddle and then on his own horse. Wolfe loves you. He wants me. There's a difference. Not for a man, honey. Not at first. Caleb swung up on his horse and started forward again, leaving Jessica staring after him. He kept to a steady pace, not wanting her to accuse him of shirking his side of the bargain. On the other hand, he never took the shortest route around any obstacle. No point in giving Wolfe cause to be any angrier than he already would be. It was late afternoon before Caleb reined in to study the route ahead. On either side lay a cluster of raw mountain peaks which were separated by a broad band of land that was clothed in trees, scrub, and grass. The divide was several miles wide at the bottom and less than a mile at its highest elevation. Where Caleb and Willow were, the land was green with the wild rush of spring and alive with meltwater from the nearby mountains. We'll camp here, Caleb said. It won't be dark for 2 hours. Caleb slanted Jessica a cool amber glance. It will take longer than that to get over the divide. If we don't camp here, we'll be picking our way through a half-frozen marsh in the dark with no place to sleep but sitting up in the saddle. Jessica met Caleb's glance, sighed, and looked uneasily over her shoulder. She thought she had caught movement behind them, but Caleb didn't seem concerned. When she looked back, he was watching her with an odd smile on his face. Don't fret, Red, Caleb said kindly. I gave you enough lead on your man that he'll work off the worst of his mad before he catches us. Wolfe isn't coming. Horseshit. Jessica gave Caleb a startled look. He smiled as gently as though she were Willow. Even if you're right, Jessica said with a catch in her voice, Wolfe couldn't get to us this quickly without riding a horse to death. He wouldn't do that. "One horse couldn't get the job done," Caleb agreed. "3 could, though. Deuce, Trey, and Ishmael." "What?" Caleb looked past Jessica at the open ground they had just covered. "If I were you," he said, "I'd spend the next few minutes thinking up ways to take the edge off Wolfe's temper." The certainty in Caleb's voice sent a stroke of unease through Jessica. She stood in her stirrups and looked past him. 2 big black horses and 1 smaller sorrel had broken from the cover of the forest and were running flat out toward her up the long sweep of the grassy divide. Only 1 horse carried a man. As she watched, the rider leaped from the back of one of the blacks to the sorrel without slowing the pace one bit. "Dear God," she breathed. "Looks more like Wolfe Lonetree to me," Caleb said dryly. With watchful amber eyes, Caleb waited while the horses thundered closer. When he saw that Wolfe's rifle was still in its scabbard, Caleb let out a silent breath of relief and gave Jessica a reassuring smile. Jessica didn't notice. She sat on Two-Spot and waited, knowing her horse had no chance to outrun the Arabian stallion. Wolfe didn't even glance at Caleb when he galloped up and pulled Ishmael to a rearing, dancing halt. Wolfe had eyes only for the red-haired girl who was sitting astride Two-Spot with a spine as straight as a ramrod. Calmly, Wolfe dismounted, turned the hot horses over to Caleb, and then stood silently watching Jessica. "I'll make camp in those trees," Caleb said, gesturing toward a scattering of evergreens a mile back down the trail. Wolfe nodded. "You might keep in mind that she was only doing what she thought was best for you," Caleb said as he took Ishmael's reins. "The same as you were doing what you thought was best for her." "Adios, Cal," Wolfe said flatly. Without another word, Caleb reined his horse back toward the setting sun, taking with him all the horses but the one Jessica rode. Two-Spot stretched against the bit and whinnied at being left behind. Without warning, Wolfe vaulted on behind Jessica, took the reins from her, and turned Two-Spot toward a nearby stand of aspens. Their delicate new leaves glowed an unearthly green in the slanting light. When the small breeze stirred, the leaves quivered as though alive and breathing. Jessica felt as shaky as one of the leaves. She looked down at the dark, lean hand holding the reins and at the arm that half-circled her without touching her. The temptation to trace the veins in the back of Wolfe's hand with her fingertips was so great that she had to close her eyes against it. An almost hidden tremor went through her as she fought not to show her hunger and yearning to touch the life that beat so strongly beneath Wolfe's controlled surface. Wolfe dismounted and tied Two-Spot to a slender aspen. Then he stood and looked at Jessica for the longest minute of her life. She met his narrowed indigo eyes, refusing to show either the pain or the yearning that seethed beneath her outward calm. "You looked surprised to see me when I rode up," Wolfe said. "Caleb wasn't. He did everything but set fire to trees so you could follow." "I would have found you if you'd gone barefoot over solid stone." "Why?" The question put the match to Wolfe's temper. "You're my wife." "The marriage isn't valid." "Like hell it isn't. I had you so deep and so hard it's a bloody wonder either one of us could walk afterward." Scarlet flags burned on Jessica's cheekbones, but she didn't back down. "You said you would withhold your fertility from the union despite my wishes otherwise," she said carefully. "That is grounds for annulment." "I was trying to spare you the risk of childbed." "So you say." Jessica shrugged casually, despite the tension that made her body feel brittle. "A magistrate might view your actions as less than noble." "That's just it," Wolfe shot back. "I'm not noble. You are." No matter how hard Jessica fought it, she couldn't prevent a scalding tear from falling. The combination of grief and rage in her voice made it shake. "And there it is," she said. "The one thing I can't change and you can't forgive." "You're not making sense." Her eyes focused on him. They were as pale and bleak as the streamside ice. "I can learn to cook and clean and launder," Jessica said. "I can burn in your arms and you in mine. But it's not enough. It will never be enough. You despise the aristocracy, and my father was an earl." "That's not—" "You want me," she continued relentlessly, "but not as a wife. I'm not fit to be the mother of your children. I'm a spoiled, cruel child. "Jessie, that's not what I—" "Girl, not a woman. As useless as teats on a boar hog. The wrong—" "Damn it, that's not—" "Yes, it is," she said harshly, talking over him. "You have never lied to me, no matter how much the truth hurt. Don't begin now when there's no more need. I trapped you. I'm setting you free. Go back to the wild land you love, the land for which you were born, the land I'm not worthy to inhabit and never will be. I am what I am, and—" "Damnation! Will you listen, or do I have to—" "You are a tree that stands alone, and lying with me was the worst mistake of your life." "Wrong!" Wolfe said furiously. "The worst mistake of my life was promising Willow I'd try talking with you first." With no warning, Wolfe yanked Jessica out of the saddle and fastened his mouth over hers. She twisted and thrashed against him, but he was much too strong. He absorbed her struggles until the wild urgency of his kiss reached her on a level deeper than words. Unable to deny Wolfe and herself any longer, Jessica yielded to him the softness he had already taken, sharing the kiss with him. It was a long time before he lifted his head. "This is the only truth that matters," Wolfe said finally, brushing Jessica's tears away. "You are mine, only mine, and I am yours." "You are a tree that stands alone." "And you are the sun in my sky. Don't take the sun from me, Jessie." She tried to speak, but was too moved by what she saw in his eyes to say more than his name. "Wolfe?" "Stay with me, Jessie Lonetree," he whispered. "Share the wild land with me. Love me as much as I love you." Epilogue. In the following months, Wolfe showed Jessica his favorite places in the western land. Together they smelled the rain winds sweeping across the desert, wearing robes of lightning and bringing the miracle of water to a dry land. Together they stood among stone buttes anchored like great ships in a boundless sea of sand. Together they saw a canyon so vast it could be crossed only by the sun, and at its bottom a river coiled like a silver medicine snake, untouched, untouchable. Together they stood in the sun-washed silence of cities built by men long dead. Ancient, enigmatic, set into sheer rock cliffs, nothing inhabited the stone cities but the wind. No paths led to the buildings, and no paths came away, yet the cities remained, filled with mysteries and spirits of a time long past, unknown, unknowable. Together they followed streams that had no name up the slopes of mountains that were also unnamed, climbing so high that angels sang in the ringing silence just before moonrise. Together they drank from lakes as blue as Wolfe's eyes and fell asleep in each other's arms, waking to find the aspens ablaze with winter's first kiss. Finally, they followed the sunrise back to the San Juans. An hour's lazy ride from Willow and Caleb's home, Wolfe and Jessica built their own home along the Columbine's clear waters. There Wolfe talked to mustangs, and Jessica stalked living rainbows through deep river pools. There, beneath a sky as deep and wild as their love, they created new life where none had been before, boys with Wolfe's fluid strength, and girls with Jessica's laughter and fire. And through all the peace and storms of all their years, Jessica was the sun in Wolfe's sky, bringing light and life to tree that stands alone.
The End. You've been listening to Only Mine by Elizabeth Lowell, narrated by Richard Ferrone. If you've enjoyed this book and this performance, Recorded Books recommends Only You, also by Elizabeth Lowell and narrated by Richard Ferrone, and Married in Haste by Kathy Maxwell, narrated by Virginia Leishman. You'll find a wide selection of titles in the Recorded Books catalog, including bestsellers, mysteries, classics, histories, and more. So to order another recorded book or for a copy of our latest listing, please call us using the toll-free number found on the back of the book. You can order by phone with any major credit card, or by writing to us, or by faxing us. Don't forget to ask about easy 30-day rentals by mail. On our website, you can browse the catalog, hear about the latest releases, place orders, or tune into narrator profiles and author interviews. So visit us there at www.recordedbooks.com. And thank you for being a Recorded Books reader.